been thinking about this for a while. And you know me, I don't like to just, just do the norm. Damn it, hang on. What I like to do is try to vary things up a little bit. So, thought about it. I was like, I've ruminated on this game. I've continued to ruminate on this game. I have then done a third rumination on this game, and I have done a lore run of this game. I have also sped run this game, and I've done a smaller version of a speed run of this game many times, actually. I've even sped run this game with other people, actually racing and losing. I think I got like, what, 4th, 5th, something like that. I don't actually remember. Not first. What haven't I done? In all the videos I've done across the last 4 years, what have I not done with this game? It just kind of hit me out of nowhere. Yeah, technically I have done multiple lore runs of this game. I did the big one for the marathon, and I did a few before that that I didn't save or put up or anything, that I just did for fun. I was just like, hey, let's just talk about FF6. That's right. I've never sat down and reviewed Final Fantasy VI. So we're going to do that. You may feel free to join me, talk, chat, whatever. As ever, no need to be a stranger. There might be a pause in about an hour for lunch, and that's it. But there are some who would enslave the world by reviving the dread destructive fools known as magic. I used to be able to do that, Samurai. I used to literally be able to do line for line, word for word. Oh, excuse me. Can't anymore. Can it be that those in power are on the verge of repeating a senseless and deadly mistake? Now, by memory, and I'm saying it like that because I'm not going to put a point like, but by memory, the dialogue does have, the text does have some issues, some, for lack of a better term, Woolseyisms in FF6. But I do have to admit, that intro crawl, it's extremely efficient. It's astonishingly quick. I mean, yes, I know the intro crawl doesn't actually end until they reach Narsh. But if you think about it, that initial thing, it's just BAM! Now, there's a little bit of awkward exposition in this scene. Really only the one. The only thing that's awkward exposition in this scene is, oh my goodness, do you really think it's an Esper after 1,000 years after the War of the Magi? That's not good dialogue. However, the rest of this all works out, because what you have here, now on the one hand, you might think, well, these soldiers shouldn't have to be discussing this stuff with each other, because surely they're fully trained and fully briefed on this situation, right? Well, no. That's, as we've seen many times, and we'll see again in the future, that's not actually how the Empire works. It is more likely these are just two random Magitech soldiers who were put on this mission because they couldn't send Terra by herself. And that was it. No further thought or effort put into it. I need to sneeze. I'm going to shush while one of the best songs in the world plays. So to continue my thoughts here, we've already had examples of good exposition and bad exposition. The good outweighs the bad so far. And like I said, it's in keeping with the process of the Empire to send these two random soldiers first. So two random soldiers who happen to be Magitech soldiers, kibitzing, debating, sharing rumors back and forth. That's very normal, that's very common. Actually, even though the translation doesn't get across the human feel of it, the intent is still there, and I feel like a proper translation would really showcase that sort of human element to these two guys who are about to die. Spoiler alert. And now to start the timer. No, I am going to set myself up, though. Now, the... so, this is going to be a weird thing, by the way, in case you guys are wondering. I'm going to be really going over this one with a fine-tooth comb, so if you guys don't want to hear that, that's fine. Just trying something new here. So I've already talked about the dialogue. One of the things worth talking about is they've been going for a specific directorial theme with this entire intro sequence. Now, Final Fantasy has always been a fan, hello Javan, of in medias res. For those who don't fully know what that means, it means starting the story in the middle and filling in the details later. Probably the most severe example of this is actually FF13, the first FF13. However, the next best example and the slightly more common example, shut up, Baronessa, is Final Fantasy X, where they deliberately made a viewpoint character, Tidus, in order to explain all the aspects of the world and the setting of the story as they went through it. FF13 failed at that, and that's, I feel, one of the reasons FF13 did have narrative problems, because it was an in medias res story just like FF10, but didn't have any good way to weave that narrative into the, weave the exposition into the narrative. Instead, it was either dumped on you, ignored completely, or put in the damn encyclopedia, none of which are really good options. So FF10 did a much better job of that. FF6 doesn't fully start in medias res, but it does at the same time, because Terra's story is already about at its halfway point. Locke's story is already about its halfway point. You know, in other words, most of the characters, and as we'll hear more about them throughout this game, their stories have already begun. Their character arcs have already begun, and we will see a little tidbits and pieces of those in different ways. There will be flashbacks, there will be them talking, there will be inferences, that kind of a thing. We'll see if those hold up. I mean, this is all speaking from memory, obviously, and Lord knows I have most of this game memorized, but we will be seeing if all that holds up on replay. See, this is the goal here. This is what I'm trying to do, guys. You can feel free to tell me how stupid and horrible this idea is or not. But what I'm trying to do here is to basically do a then and now of FF6. Really try to reanalyze the game. Really turn on analysis mode. Really be critical. See what's good. See what's bad. Now, unfortunately, I have to stop again and comment on how amazing a lot of the things they did were with the graphics and the sound design. This wind sound effect, it's the same wind sound effect they actually use in Chrono Trigger. By the way, we'll be doing the same thing with Chrono Trigger next, so if you like this review thing, feel free to watch for that. It'll probably be on the weekend or next week, something like that. But anyways, FF6. So, the sound effect of this wind, it's all emphasizing a point. The idea here is they're trying to emphasize a world that is already on the edge of despair. They're already at the point where the world is in its twilight era, like the change of a given era and the beginning of a new one. This is showcased everywhere. Look at the palette. Look at the palette that has been showcased on the screen thus far. It's all muted, subtle, quiet colors, kind of dark, kind of depressing of a tone, you know? Do you see that? How the it's got that dirtier tone to it, and all the things, those aren't golden. You know, those are like brass or lost metal or whatever like that. You know, things that showcase both the age and the new time, the fact that's coming out, the fact that the new era is starting here. They're showcasing this visually and audibly, and we're like 5 minutes into the game. God, I love this game. Every now and again, I like reanalyzing a game. You know what I mean? Just because it reminds me of how much I love the game. And you know what else I love? Canada Dry, made in Alexandria and packaged in Narsh. One more thing I want to talk about before I move on, though. Well, actually, you see the little steam boiler down there? And the wheel, which is providing some kind of power. We've got some kind of steampunk thing going on there. There's a smokestack. It's got steam coming out of it on the top there. First of all, I'd just like to say I absolutely adore the attention to detail that was put into the sprite work. I'm pausing right here because the thing they do with FF6 is they do it perfectly, because the best sprite work, the best graphics work in the world is the stuff you will never notice unless you're really looking for it. Look at what's in the middle of the screen right now. You see that? Do you see that platform going across? Notice there are actual shadows on the right platform, on the right building that's coming out. I know you can't see where I'm pointing, but it's right there. The chunk of the building just to the right of this shaded, so you see the sun's coming from the left side. If you look on the far left, you see that that chunk of cliff has also shaded that area over there. Tiny little things. That shading, though, gives it a degree of depth. Makes it so you can see the perspective. Makes it so you can see. It makes it feel like less of a picture and more of a three-dimensional object, even though it is literally sprite work. And in addition to that, I don't know how many of you guys out there have done sprite work. I know several of you have. But look at how the attention to detail. I'm actually staring at my monitor right here. I'm like right up on it. And I've got it set up so you can see each individual pixel. No anti-aliasing turned on. And the level of detail in the woodwork, and the fact that the wood isn't a solid color. There's several different colors going on. It's not even static patterns in some cases. They've got a couple of different patterns for the tile set. So sometimes it'll be this tile, sometimes it'll be that tile. The shading, as I already mentioned, changes the colors of what they do with the wood. The tiles on the roof, there's a technique that they're using there, and I don't actually remember what it's called in drawing. I remember this back from forever ago when I actually took drawing classes. Is anybody listening to me? I'm just curious. There's a technique where you don't draw all the details. You draw enough of the details that the mind of the viewer fills in the blanks. This is especially done, like, for example, if you want to do a brick building is a great example of this. And you don't draw in every single individual brick, you draw in a few of the bricks. They're doing this with the roof. They only showcase where the shading is on the tiling of whatever that is, the lacquer or the plastic or the clay or whatever they're actually using up there. So you get the impression of exactly what you're looking at, and the full detail there, but you don't actually have it. And then, of course, they actually did do the full detail in other cases, like the brick on the platform that we just went over, this whole archway here. You actually can see each individual brick, and the fact that they did each thing on this arch right here, right where my Majestic armor is under. And as you can see, it's a little, they mirrored it, because, they got to save something. It's actually, the tiles are actually that, and that, so it's actually only like 5 tiles there. But still, that's just incredible that they bothered to put that time of effort into it. And this is, if you can forgive me, this is by memory what I love about this game in a nutshell. If I had to summarize one reason why FF6 has risen above everything else to just sit at the top of the heap, it's because they cared. They did so much work and effort into tiny little things that you technically should never notice, that don't matter, that are not required for the game, just to make it a better game, just to flesh it out more. So that's that's graphics, that's sound design, that's thematic design. We already talked about the narrative a bit. We're going to be talking about combat very, very shortly, because we're going to go up here and we're going to fight this guy. Do note that they do something fantastically interesting here, at least to me. What they do is they use the wrong ability. I should have killed him. What they do, ignore the combat for a moment. What they do is simultaneously encourage exploration, because there's a reward for that. We get experience for having defeated the wolf. We are rewarded for the fact that we bothered to go over here, and we got a little bit of additional dialogue. So we have a gameplay and a story, a lore, reward for bothering to explore in this direction. But remember, this is a linear game. All Final Fantasies are linear games, and every Final Fantasy since the very first one has been an exercise in hiding the linearity, trying to mask the linearity by pretending at or attempting exploration or rewarding exploration or something like that. And I know that's a dinky, tiny little thing, but the fact that we can go over here and get that one little extra cutscene, which I know some people, back when this came out on the SNES, like my friend Vincent, had no idea You can go over to the right and see that extra little thing, because for him it's just a straight line, which is the other side of the coin. They are obviously encouraging. There's this one. Narsh is one of the only towns that's like this in the whole game. There's this one path. It's even got the grate going on it for the sewer there, which, by the way, nice work on that too. Graphics work. Love the tile work. Absolutely love the sprite work on this game. But there's this one thing, and it's going straight up, and so it's really obvious, you know, what you're supposed to be doing. It's just, aha, straight down this line, you know, right? No attempt at anything else. It's just everyone can figure that out immediately and instantly, right? But let's talk about the gameplay a little bit. By memory, this is among my favorite of the ATB systems. We'll see if that holds up after time. But one of the things that I like about it is it's very smooth and very intuitive, and it just flows. You know, it's not as good as, say, FF10-2, which is my favorite of the ATB systems, but there's not. They figured out all the problems they had with both FF4 and FF5 with the stalling. They figured out all the things with the. I don't know, Samurai. I'm really curious. We'll see. We'll see. They figured out all the stalling problems. They managed to make it. They did a lot more framework. I mean, literally per framework, so things could go smoothly from one point to the next. There actually still is a casting bar. I've talked about this before during speedruns and whatnot. There's actually still a casting bar in this game. It's just so tiny and minuscule that you wouldn't even notice it unless you're aware it's there or you happen to be using the gem box. Now, I'd just like to give one more thing of praise here because, God, I love the sprite work. There's a shovel right there. There's a pickaxe. There's a sign that says this is an item shop, so it's useful information, and that's where you go buy items later on in the game. And you get the impression that this is an actual city, even though if you think about it, Narsh is actually pretty small. You know, it takes a couple minutes to traverse it, but they do a lot to make it feel like a larger place, especially given how many buildings are here that are basically just buildings that include a few NPCs that say a few lines, and that's it. You know, barrels of stuff out there, which are being covered. You have the tarps over the barrels. Why do you have tarps over the barrels? Because they are in the snow. You know, lots of good stuff here. Another thing they do good with this initial work here, as we're going through this, it becomes more and more clear that this is a surprise attack. This is one of the ways they weave. I'm going to go and put a plus on story at this point. I think there is definitely a plus deserved for the story as of this moment right here. There is a sense of the fact that this is a surprise attack, because one of the first things they say, one of the very first things that happens when we attack this town is, "Hi, Kimmick." No, that's not what they say. They say, you know, "Oh my God, even Narsh isn't safe anymore." Now that line is a little bit, huh? And it's not the best written line in the universe, or maybe it's just not the best translated line in the universe. But you know what I like about it? It gets across 2 points of information, bam, bam, just like that. Number one, Narsh should not be involved in whatever conflict's going on. We don't know why, we don't know the politics of the situation, but for whatever reason, Narsh should not be involved. And number two, this is a surprise attack. As we start moving through here, it becomes more and more obvious that we have caught Narsh by surprise. And another thing, and this is great, this is so fantastic. You know what? I'm going to give it another plus. This one to gameplay and to story, because what they are doing here is gameplay and story integration. What they're doing is they're showcasing the political situation of Narsh, the military advantage of the Empire, and the desperate situation that the Returners are in all through this sequence, and they're doing it in gameplay, because the first thing they do is they give you these Magitech armors, which are damn strong. We can literally one-shot anything except for the boss in this entire section. Just crush them like bugs. And that gets across the point from a story perspective of just how overwhelmingly strong the Empire is. From a military perspective, from a technological perspective, from a magical perspective. Screw you, Titans. Seriously, though. If you think I am being biased, by all means challenge me, but you better have a counter-argument, because I am trying to be as neutral in this as I can while still gushing. Because, damn it, this is some good stuff. So, okay. Neutral. Now, okay. Let's talk about the sprite work on the... There we go. Sprite work on the sprites themselves. Now, this is this is interesting because I'm not going to put it as a positive for this, but I will say I like the fact that yeah, we do, Deutsch. That is true. We do. I like the fact that they took something they started in FF4 and took it to the next logical level. If you don't know what I mean by that, in FF4 there was a single sprite, just one, where a character would bow their head. And they had to use that in order to express a huge amount of emotion across the course of FF4. It's so prevalent that me and my friends, Vincent and Joel, actually had a joke back back when FF4 first came out on the SNES, and thank you, Titans. We had a joke that Cecil always had his head bowed. And he'd go up, he'd go to the refrigerator and he'd open it, and there's no milk today. Head bow. In FF6, they took that to the next level. They have the surprise one. They have the emotion. They bothered to add additional sprites to show more of an emotional range, and got across a surprising amount of information as far as the characters go with that sprite work. However, it is still the super deformed sprite that does limit what they can do extensively. And it is something that, as weird as this is going to sound, I know this is kind of a negative and a positive. That's why there's no pluses or minuses here. This just evens itself out for me. The thing is, while in some cases the sprites fit perfectly with the, yeah, you're right, FF5 actually started it. FF6 just polished it. That's FF6 in a nutshell. FF6 didn't start anything. It just polished everything. And honestly, I think that's true. I think that's why FF6 is, in my opinion, the best. Possibly Agredo, yes, that is a very distinct possibility. But the sprite work kind of feels like it's on another layer from the background. I know it is literally on another layer from the background. If you don't know what I mean, here, look. See, there's the sprites, and there's the backgrounds back there. See, this level 5 here is actually the sprite layer right there. But that's not what I mean. The sprites are a lot more colorful in the foreground, and so in some cases they don't quite mesh with the much more, I know this sounds like a weird word, realistic backgrounds, because a lot of the backgrounds in this game, for a sprite game, for a SNES era game, in my opinion, are fantastically well designed and well drawn. And again, as I gushed over the design of an arch, I mean, look at this here. Look at this door right here. That is an exceptionally well designed door from a sprite perspective. I mean, no expense was spared. You can see the latch, you can see the shading that's caused by the parts of the door that are coming out. There's the window there. There's the darkened. I mean, you can even tell that it's offset. It's actually in the doorway rather than just being on the doorway. Too many people, when they're drawing, especially in sprite work, they tend to draw things on without taking into account depth. So that's awesome that they did that. And then you've got this guy who doesn't have near the amount of detail put into him. Now, you still have an idea of what we're looking at. You can still see the claws on the armor. You can still tell this is obviously some kind of mechanized thing with some kind of engine on the back, and you get this impression of the ponderous nature of what the Magitech armor really is. But again, that's why I say it's a positive and a negative. It kind of evens itself out, so we're not going to add any or take away any for that one. I'm going to rest my throat for just a second. I've been talking non-stop for 24 minutes. Now, one other thing, I guess is, I lied. I'm going to say one other thing. One of the other things they did, they added a little bit more RNG to the game. I've talked about this before. Yeah, exactly, Scorpion's Wrath, excuse me. One of the things they did in FF4 and 3 and 2 and 1, actually, was the, I'm trying to think how best to describe this for someone who doesn't know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm about to cast Cure. Okay? Now, when I cast Cure, there is a range. This doesn't actually apply out of combat. The formulas for in combat and out of combat are completely separate. But there's a range of what that Cure can be. Okay? Make sense? This is the same for attacks. This is the same for magic damage. It's all the same thing. There is a range. So, just to make numbers up completely off the top of my head, it can do 5 to 50 damage. Now, that sounds like a big range, but that's the point. Back in FF4 and 3 and 2, that range was much tighter. Usually, even at the end game, it was only a couple of 100 points off of itself. FF5 kind of mixed with that a little, and it really added the formula-style stuff. I will do this type of damage based on these circumstances. But FF6 decided to add a huge variance to that. So instead of 5 to 50, it would be more like, say, 5 to 150, which is a huge gap there. And one of the things that can be both frustrating and exciting, depending on your perspective, again, no plus or minus for this, because this is a matter of opinion. This is all up to you. But it's one of those situations, it's like rolling the dice. You know what I mean? If you don't understand what I mean by that, it is more RNG. So if you like that kind of thing, and you roll the dice and you get lucky, it's like, yeah, you really celebrate those successes because, oh, yeah, I barely made it work. I got the lucky dice. But of course, the opposite can be true, especially if you don't like RNG. You know, having a good tactic, having a good setup, and being screwed over by good RNG can be frustrating. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is going to be up to you, but there's definitely a huge amount of RNG just to the combat, solely to the combat of FF6. I'm not even talking about the encounters rate or anything like that yet, although we will be shortly. I just want to pause a moment. There's a nice little thing here, that bridge, that covered bridge going across there. That's just some nice work. They really, again, this is not something new to 6, but they really worked out the layering and the transparency aspect of the sprite work in 6. I feel like this is the one that pulls that off best. Maybe not of all sprite games ever, but definitely of the FF series. Again, not something they started here. But, you know, the fact that you can go behind things like that, again, it sounds like a minor thing, and it is, but that's my point. Just like the sprite work itself, just like the audio work they did earlier, it's a tiny little thing that really adds to this. Now here, this is interesting. This is funny, because this is another wonderful aspect of game design. This is what we call slow escalation. I think it's funny because it's not actually an escalation when you think about it. But for a brand new player, all of a sudden you're not fighting a couple of dogs, and I think you're fighting these big boar things, and you're fighting some soldiers. Like, oh crap, what am I going to do? As you can see, it's still not an issue. It's in fact a complete joke. There's no difficulty there. Oh, another example of the transparency bridge thing here. But it's done to make the player... It's not done to actually challenge the player. That's not the goal. The goal is to get the player into the mindset of, okay, this is going to escalate. And that'll lead into the boss in a moment here. Great example of game design there. Really tiny thing. And yeah, the Wheaton curse. Oh, God, Javin. I don't know if you've seen the latest message I PM'd you, but I had to flub a thing. That's all I'm going to say. I was unwilling to accept the dice as a result of that. So now, and they throw these things at you. Now, this is another fascinating example of game design here. Up until now, most players, statistically speaking, in this era, I should say, I don't know if this is true anymore, but in this era, in the SNES, in the N64, in the PS1, and the PS2, and the GameCube era, right? All that are in the Xbox era. In that era, the most common thing for most gamers, again, just average, to do is to go for whatever the quickest and easiest method is towards success, right? So, for example, and I'll use FF6 as an example, a lot of players who played FF6 were like, hey, Ultima, and they just spam Ultima, and all their strategies and all their setup and all their leveling would be centered around getting as many Ultimas out as possible. Chrono Trigger, Luminaire, you know, same idea, right? So it is not unheard of that of the various encounters you have, hey Demonium, that you've had up until this point in time in the game, you have discovered Bio, which you've seen me using it several times already, and realized, aha, that's you know, the perfect thing to do this. So let me just demonstrate for the three of you who've never played this game and don't actually know what's going to happen here. So they throw these were-rats, which are in every way worse. You see that? Every way. I mean, every way. These guys are actually weaker than all the enemies we've been fighting so far, except they're absorbent to poison. And all of a sudden it's like, and that's the only AoE we have. I mean, we have this one, but they won't do anything. I'm going to give another plus to gameplay for something I'm going to demonstrate in just a moment. I'll explain my reasoning. Don't worry, I'm not just randomly giving out pluses here. Okay, so here's the other plus. I want to cast Fire Beam. There's a single glove out there. You see that? Ice Beam, Heal Force, gloves over here. Clearly demonstrating. Now, this is cool. This is so cool. As you know, later on in the game, actually, technically, now I can do this here. Watch. I could go to Magic, and I could fire myself, and I could cure them, right? There's no limitations on that, okay? However, for Magitech, which is the kind of thing you should be using for the initial part of the game, they like to showcase this. You cannot Fire Beam yourself. So you get used to the idea that the finger being over there is an offensive spell, and the finger being over here is a healing spell, or a restorative spell, or a buff, right? It gives that information out there without ever having to have a tutorial pop up and say, hey, right? Because it's restricted. I cannot heal them, and I cannot damage me. Then they do this. Oh, hang on, wrong thing. Then they do this. Now, I don't know how well you're seeing that because of the 30 FPS, 60 FPS thing, but now, all of a sudden, the hands are doing two things different. One, there's multiple hands, and two, they're flickering. This shows you clearly that it's an AoE. For those who don't know what I mean, that means area of effect. In other words, it hits multiple targets simultaneously. So you get used to the idea of what an AoE is, what an AoE can be, very early and very quickly. Now, this is intended to lean you into this. Right there. The fact that you can turn a regular spell from a single target into a multi-target. And there's a few other things I'll talk about with regard to later, but that's some good data. That's my reasoning for why they got another plus for the gameplay. We're going to go and set up for the tech missile now. I'd also like to say that FF6, and this is true, is the first game to include all of the convenience features of the UE that I like. FF4 had virtually none. FF5 kind of started having convenience features. If you don't know what I mean by convenience features, I'll actually show the case of that, and I think that might actually be another plus, but I want to go through it. We'll see if it actually deserves a plus when we say hi to Scott. Hi, Scott. Sorry, Marley. Alright, so here's what I mean by the convenience features. See how easy this is? How quick I can do it? Here's all my skills. It's all organized. I can hit R and L to go down and up quickly, or I can do it manually. I have this button right here called Optimum, which is the best button in the friggin' world. For those of you who don't know, back in FF4, there was no Optimum. And there's one other thing related that you might be like, well, why would you need an Optimum? Are you just lazy? Well, no. The other problem that FF4 had, let me showcase it this way. Here we go. You see that on the right? It shows exactly what the stat changes are based on which items you put where. Okay, that's cool. That's awesome. There's another feature that's awesome that's new to this one. Check this one out. You see this? Mithril Knife can be used by Terra. It shows its attack stat. And if you put it over to the left, and there's an arrow there. You see that arrow on the blink on the left? So you know you can hit left. It's an automatic thing. Left. This is exactly what it does. If it has any special effect, now obviously nothing I have right now has special effects, but as you can see, it'll show if it absorbs anything, if it half damages anything, if it has no effect to something, if it has a weakness, if it makes you more weak to a type of thing. All that information, bam, 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 right there. This stuff was all missing from FF4. So you would get, a sword, and you wouldn't know how good it is. You would assume it's better because you got it after the previous sword, but that wasn't always true in FF4. That isn't actually true. There are plenty of cases where you'll get a worse sword later than the previous time because of the way the gear works out in FF4. This is especially true in the... And now, all of this has been fixed in the DS version and the GBA version and the PSP version, but in the original SNES, none of this was here. See? It even shows you how many items you have. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, of course, there's the Arrange button. This is a frickin' fantastic button, too. The best part is, I can't showcase this just yet. This deserves a gameplay plus. I'm sorry. This is UE 101 right here. The best part here is that, let's say, I know this is fictional because I don't actually have the thing, but let's say I had the tonic here and a potion here, and I hit Arrange. What it would do is it would keep my item order for the specific items. It wouldn't rearrange those. So if I want tonic below potion, bam, there it goes. And of course, there's the raid. This is basically quest items. That's all that is. Those are there for scripting and flag purposes. But I like that they show you in a little bit of lore tidbit. So yeah, this is all really, really awesome stuff. Of course, you can remove individual items, and there's an empty button, which is also a fantastic thing. Bam! Yeah, by the way, cursor memory. I haven't even talked about that. Cursor memory is the freaking best thing ever. Cursor memory, you've already seen me show it. Okay, for those who don't know, cursor memory should be in like every game RPG that has a menu system ever, and I mean that sincerely. cursor memory is, let's say, I'll give you an example of a game that does not have that, Final Fantasy IV. I know I hate to keep going back to one. Hey, Dark Crystal, what's up? So you're going through Final Fantasy IV or whatever, or one of the early Breath of Fires, and you are farming, or you're in an area where it's like a lava, you're in a volcano area, right? So everything here is weak to ice, so every battle you're just casting ice on all, or an ice 2, or something like that, okay? So every battle, every single battle, you go into it, you have to hit down A to go into the magic, and then down, 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 and then right to ice, and then A, and then left and A, and that'll actually cast it. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't. But if I've gotten 1 point across this whole time, hey Stars of the Ocean, if I've gotten 1 point across this whole time, the little details matter when it comes to the real masterpieces, when it comes to really good games. So, and for really bad games that matter. So, having to do that every single encounter, you know, down A, down, 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 right A, left A, down A, down, 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 right A, left A. Just think about doing that every single battle. It gets old. It gets frustrating. It gets irritating, and again, it just gets old. I'm sure Java knows exactly. I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. Play an NES RPG sometime, and tell me how frustrating the combat gets after a while. The memory button gets rid of all of that, because, bam, you hit A. It's already on magic. You look, and not only is it already on magic, it's on the spell you cast last. So you hit A, and you're already on the ice spell. Bam, done. 2 button presses right there. FF6 did another thing. This is not new to FF6, but I feel it was best implemented in this and in Chrono Trigger both. That's holding A down. Now, there's a weird thing about this. Chrono Trigger is a little bit different about this. We'll talk about when we get there. But in FF6, when you're holding A down, it does frame counting. Basically, every other frame or every other frame, based on the input, it'll be polling to see if you're holding down that button. Okay. That means if you're in an area where you just want to hold down A, and you know, auto A is what I actually call it, auto A. If you just want to blaze through a combat and you've already got everything set up, you know, you've got Edgar on auto crossbow, you've got Sabin on fight, you've got Locke on fight, that kind of thing, right? You just hold down A, and every other frame or every other frame, it'll pull that and it'll blaze through it, and it'll go by very, very quickly. And that's key and crucial in order to make you, make combat smooth. Smoothness is so important to gaming design. I cannot stress that enough. If your gameplay is stilted, and if you don't know what I mean by stilted, like stop go, or you know, unnecessary pauses, or improperly paced, you know, there's no pattern to it, then all you're going to have is a gamer who is not enjoying themselves as much as they should at best, or is actively hating the gameplay at worst. I'm going to give you an example of this. Earthbound. Okay? Earthbound had a lot of convenience features, but the gameplay, the actual combat, third. You remember, he really didn't like the combat in the game. He hated the combat of the game. He hated having to deal with it. He hated having to push through all that stuff. And admittedly, he did have several valid points about it. I don't remember if he even mentioned them in the video. He and I talked about it off camera extensively. And he had several valid points on it because it wasn't smooth. It was stilted for him, right? He had issues with the flow of it, and it just ground on him until it got to the point where he was at like Foresight, I want to say, and he just, at that point, he actively disliked, actively was a negative for him to go into combat, and he started trying to avoid it, which of course leaves him under-leveled, and that just makes it even worse, right? FF6 goes out of its way in its design philosophy and all the things I've been talking about to smooth that out. Zoom! Or, oh, you want to do this, zoom, you know, or this, zoom. And again, the cursor layout gives you a very significant way of knowing, at least in part, what's going to happen. Speaking of which, this is another cool one. Recovers HP. Now, obviously that's not that useful. Cures poisoning. Fire elemental attack. It's not the most informative thing in the world, but it is nice that it's there, especially since in some cases it wouldn't be. And some of the spells are not super obvious what they would do. But even more importantly, if you are someone who has never played a game like this before, and remember, that is something game designers need to keep in mind. There are people who started the FF series with this game. There are people who started RPGs and JRPGs with this game. And this is true with a lot of the other FF series as well, for that matter. They need to keep that kind of thing in mind They need to keep that kind of thing, that kind of mentality in mind. So they have that information there. So even someone who's played like any RPG ever, any fantasy RPG ever, is like, oh, well, yeah, fire's going to do some fire damage. Someone who hasn't just sees fire and is like, well, what's that do exactly? And they can say, it's a fire elemental attack. Notice it specifically says attack, by the way. In other words, it's not a utility spell. It's not there to burn a bridge or to break down a a wall or whatever. This is here to attack an enemy with a fire type damage. Done. Very easy, very quick, very simple. Easy to understand. It says how much the MP cost is up there. Note that in the spell menu, it shows your current HP and MP right there, so you can make tactical decisions. Cure cost me 5 MP. I've got 7 left. I got 1 more cure in me. I'm actually going to blow it right now. And I know that. Now, that's another convenience feature that just happened there, but I'm going to talk about it in a moment. So, you do that, and I'd say the 3DS XL personally, Dark Penance, but that's because of the library. It has nothing to do with the hardware. The Vita is actually, the Vita is actually a really good thing. I just wish it had more games on it. Hopefully it'll have more support in the future, but honestly, it's not really likely at this point in time. Whereas the 3DS is continuing to have new support and will have continued to have new games for it. Moving along. So, you notice how so you can choose. It's like, okay, well, I've got 7 MP, I've got 1 more cure in me, and I can see roughly how much health that's going to heal because I can see that my HP right there, so I know exactly how much healed for me. But the other thing is, once I ran out of MP to cast the spell that I was trying to cast, it bumped me back to the menu, and you notice they're grayed out now. I hate to keep going back to FF4, but FF4 is a good example because FF4 is a good example of how most RPGs were at the time. And yeah, by the way, what was said with regard to Phantasy Star, I forget which one it is. He says it's 4. I believe him. Was definitely an example of, what the heck does this spell do? In fact, all I got to say to that is the spell Indignation. I mean, what the hell does Indignation do, right? Anyways, so in FF4, if you went to say Cure the Party, and you're on the shut up, Titans. You're on the thing, and you're trying to cure, and eventually it'll just go. Bzz. There'll be like a. Bzz. And that's the only thing they could think of at the time to come up with to inform you that you either were out of mana or whatever. In this one, they actually kick you back. You saw it happen. They kick you back to the spell screen, and now they're grayed out, so you know you can't cast those. And, of course, there's all these things we'll talk about later. And that we'll talk about later. We're going to talk about this really quick, too, though, while we're here. A little bit of this is not as informative as I'd like. I'm not going to say this is a huge positive. There are some things here that are positives. There is a good amount of information here. The exp, the amount for how much experience you need to level up. Speed is obvious. Magic power is obvious. Battle power is obvious. Defense is obvious. Evade %. Notice it specifically says %. That's also useful and also obvious. Magic defense, obvious. Magic block %. Again, %, obvious. So you get it, right? All of that's logical. Vigor. It took me, I'll freely admit this, it took me a few years to understand the exact purpose of vigor and stamina, both. I know that now, mainly because of tassing and speedrunning this game and picking this game's code apart with a fine-tooth nail, thanks to the wonderful help of many other individuals who are much better at that sort of thing than I am. But, vigor and stamina are both fantastic examples of what the heck does that actually do, Config, this is another nice thing. I've always said the more configuration options, the better. This is actually not my favorite Final Fantasy when it comes to config. That's actually 7, believe it or not. I think 7 has the best overall configuration menu. The most options and the best options. But there's still some cool stuff here. Active and wait. They don't explain these here. I'll talk about that in a moment. Battle speed. Battle speed is one of the most misunderstood things in the old FFs. I've talked about this before. For those of you who don't know, it would be better. I mean this sincerely. It would be better if battle speed was just called difficulty. 1 is the most difficult. 6 is the easiest. Because all battle speed does is affect how fast the enemy moves, not you. And so the mere term, battle speed, is actually kind of it's kind of a negative, if you understand. It's kind of uninformative. And there's nothing in the game that really explains that properly. Message speed is obvious. Command set it's obvious once you do it. I'll showcase shorts, you understand. The gauge, that's the ATB bar, which you can get rid of if you want. Sound, go to stereo and mono, which is great. There's the cursor thing we've already talked about, memory. Re-equip. This is a cool thing. I know several people who actually specifically do empty as a strategy point. But the idea here is when you have to do any re-equip thing, like for example, let's say I equipped a Genji glove on a character, on the relic. Well, what happens is that forces the game to do a re-equip. Oh God, Samurai, I'm amazed you got through that. Yes, Javan, it's the same exact thing on the GBA version. When you do whenever you do something, and there's several things in the game, but the Genji glove is the easiest to understand. Equipping or unequipping the Genji glove changes the way in which you can equip items. This is the same thing with the merit badge. It's another relic. There's a few things in the story where there's a trigger point where you need that. So when that happens, you can decide, do you want to just optimum it, which is exactly like I just showed in equipment. You know, you hit the optimum and bam, done. Or you want to empty it, which is exactly like I showed there too. It just gets rid of all the equipment on the person. That's personal preference. I usually leave it on optimum. Controller. Now this one's another one of those weird ones that a lot of people didn't fully understand for a long time. This, did you know FF6 has a multiplayer? What it is, I imagine a lot of you knew this. Back in the day, I was like, I had a few friends. I was like, "Hey, David, did you know that this has multiplayer?" Huh? Yeah, give me your second controller, and we'd plug it in. And we'd play FF6 together. I played FF6 with Vincent all the damn time. I keep mentioning Vincent. He was my friend right around this point in time in the SNES era. Vincent, Joel, and David. They're all great guys. And Jason too. He was there too. But yeah, so multiplayer. What it is both players have control over the overworld, if you know what I mean. So, for example, if I'm holding left and up or something like, let's say, like, you know, I'm moving around. Yeah, 4 has a pseudo multiplayer thing. 5 has the 2-player thing as well. And yeah, 9 does too. Anyways, so if I get up to go get a drink, the person on the second controller can take over and just start moving around, and they'll have control over the overworld. But the real way it comes in is in the battle. I can't showcase this right now because I only have one party member. But what it is let's say I've got a party of who am I going to have at the end of here? Terra, Locke, Edgar, and Sabin, right? So I can set Terra and Locke to player 1, Edgar and Sabin to player 2. Okay. Now this is really cool because they do 2 things that are awesome with this. I agree, XCOM should have been a co-op multiplayer. I would have played the crap out of that. So player 1 will always be the one controlling Terra and Locke. So whenever their ATB bars come up, that's you. And you could just sit on that if you wanted to, you know, if you want to be a dick, but obviously that's not the goal. And the other player could then play the other 2 characters, which is about as co-op as a game like this is going to get, so that makes sense, right? The really cool thing is they bothered to add a variation to the sound effects. The same sound effect, but the SNES has the ability to wiggle. Really, Deacon? That's stupid. They have the ability to, like, wiggle a sound file just a little bit. And so it'll be like, ring, you know, whenever someone's turn comes up. You know the sound, right? That's good sound design. I should have mentioned that earlier. But whenever a player's turn comes up, it goes, ring. And so you know audibly that it is now your ability to punch in input, right? Your ATB is filled. But if it's the second player's thing, it'll go bring, different tone. So bring and bring. I'm exaggerating so you can get across. But if you heard it, which I can't do right now, obviously, but if you heard it, you would see what I mean. So that way you can tell, again, audibly exactly which person has control at any given point. So that's awesome. This is cool. They don't allow you to... in FF4, this is actually a point in FF4's favor, so don't think I'm bashing the game. In FF4, you could set up your spell menu however you wanted to. You could customize where every single spell was in the menu, and here you cannot do that. They have a set order, but that set order is per category, healing, attack, and effect, right? White, black, and yellow, basically. So, yeah, exactly, Deacon. What they let you do is they let you do all 6 variants of the order. You know, healing first, attack first, effect first, right? And then the variants on the bottom half, as you can see there. So if you want cure at the top, fire in the middle, haste at the bottom, you can do that. If you want is, you know, it's literally an option. I've never seen anyone do effect at the top, like ever in my whole life. Feel free to tell me if you've done that. But the fact that they give you the option to organize that however you want to is awesome. Oh yeah, FF12 I also agree should be multiplayer. Now I actually tend to prefer attack healing or healing attack. We'll go ahead and go with healing attack, which is of course the default window. Now FF7 I still think is superior to this, but FF6 is unique because FF7 lets you customize the colors on a 4-square grid basically, which I can't showcase. And previous FFs let you basically do this. I'll kind of demonstrate. Hang on. Hang on. There we go. Let you do this. This is what previous... Oh, I'm doing it wrong. Hang on. There we go. This is what previous FFs would let you do right here. See this? A little less to the extent, because they didn't have full 31 points of color. But you get the idea. And they could mix and match because the SNES has the ability to do that as a hardware feature. Right? You with me so far? This is what most other RPGs prior to this time let you do. The thing that FF6 did that was unique is this. They had different textures, for lack of a better term, back here. So there's plain, it's just a color. There's the granulated. There's the water. There's the, you know, the sunset kind of wood texture or whatever. There's the parchment kind of looking cloudish thing. I'm not sure what that is. There's this one, which is the granite. There's the forest, which is actually one of my favorites. And then there's the freaking chocobos, because they had a sense of humor back then. Oh, definitely at Plus Titans. Now, the cool thing is, it's not just... Yeah, Demon Chocobo. We're not doing that. The cool thing about this is it's not just the textures. You still have full customization of the colors, just like you would in the normal thing. So, for example, one thing I like to do, and I think I've showcased this, let's see. I just switch green and blue. That's all I do. So, 21 to 14. Push this down to 14. Push this one up to 21. We'll do the next one. This one down to 11. This one up to 17. And you can mix and match these. I have seen so many different color variations and designs that people have done over the years of these backgrounds, and I encourage you to share with me any stories of what you like to do, because I think this entire thing is freaking awesome. And there you go. We have this nice deep lavender, purple, bluish forest background, which is my personal favorite. And the one I like to use most often when I actually have when I'm not speedrunning, basically. When I'm speedrunning, I don't even touch all this stuff. And the best part is, it'll save it. So it's like, you know, I could go, you know, it's like, well, I want to do this window. Okay, so now we're here. But then I go back down here. It's still the purple thing, right? So I could just be like, bzz, ta-da. But you guys want the chocobo, because you're all psychotic, so you got it. But we don't want a white chocobo, do we? So why don't we have a golden chocobo? So that would be, wait, is it red? Ah, it's red. Okay, so let's get the... Yeah, FF9, that is probably one of my biggest complaints of the config menu of FF9. It has... well, basically, there are no options in the FF9 config menu. I'm sorry, there aren't. There's auto-run, there's the memory cursor thing, there's blue or gray, and that's kinda it. And I feel that's disappointing, personally. I get a little sheen going on there. There we go. But, you know, I don't think... Hang on, let's... He's kind of tired. I mean, look at him. He's just... So we're gonna... Actually, we'll make it more like that. There we go. Make it a little higher, and then we'll have Fat Chocobo hanging, chilling with his homeboys, or whatever. I don't know. And he's suddenly green for no reason. Yeah, okay. We're not doing that. So, you know what? I think that last 5-10 minutes of discussion deserves another plus to gameplay for the customization options of the UE and the convenience features of the UE. It's one of the reasons why I hold FF6 up as one of the better examples of UE, like ever. Now, this is kind of neat. As anyone who's played this game knows, this actually leads somewhere to the right, but we can't fit. They went out of their way to make the cave thing small so you would know it wouldn't fit. And, of course, if you try, it won't, because Magitek Armor actually has a different hitbox, or actually a different collision box, excuse me, than if you're just walking around as a standard sprite. So the other thing they do is they have this green, this blinking blue thing. Now, of course, anyone who's played an RPG ever is like, oh, it's a save point. But people, again, who are just new to this are like, what's this? This pops up. Now, this is interesting. I've talked about this in my speedruns. No matter when you first touch a save point, you could literally touch a save point in the world of Ruin and in Kefka's Tower. And when you first hit that, this message will pop up. Whenever you first hit a save point, it does this. Now, there is some tutorialization in this game. There is a decent amount of tutorialization in this game. Believe it or not, this is probably arguably the first JRPG that did that. I'm okay with it for two reasons. Number one, there are some things it's a little difficult to explain in the gameplay, like because of the way how complicated this game actually is. B, it's all optional. You can just hit no. Bzz, and it'll go away and it'll never come back. Or if you hit yes, it'll be like, well, at save points you can use a sleeping bag or a tent. Note it puts it in quotes. It does that specifically so you know that's an item. You know that's the exact name of the item. In fact, if you were to look at the string for the text of this, if you look at the way this is written in the code, what it says is at save points you can use a asterisk 55738 or asterisk 55757 and also save a game. Those are the item codes. This is how they did the text for this game, and how they do text in most games of this era. They won't actually write out in the text sleeping bag. They'll write out the item code, and it'll just put in the item code, the item name, into that slot in the text, right? That's how they do custom naming. That's how they know to say Terra, or Bob, or Jim, or Green Hair, or whatever it is you put in for the name, because it doesn't actually, the text doesn't actually say Terra. It says, asterisk, or not asterisk, excuse me, percentage name. I don't know why I said asterisk, percentage name. And that's all it'll say is, percentage name, you must do this. And it'll pull from the memory and say, oh, well, you need Terra there. So that is a really, really modular way to do that, and works awesomely. Bzz. If you perish, you'll automatically be able to play from your last save. Though any GP treasures, etc. you have found will have to be found again, your level and experience data will be retained. You can save a game anywhere on the world map. Bam! Tutorial done. Now, first of all, quick and easy tutorial. Second of all, very informative on one of the unique tricks in FF6. That unique trick actually can lead to some rather interesting bugs. So, you can keep the exp that you went to get. Now, there's actually an additional niggle they didn't tell you. You will not gain the stat ups that you would gain. If you know what I mean by that, if you have Tritalk, the Esper, equipped, if you have Tritalk equipped, every time you level, you gain an additional 3 magic power, in addition to your normal level up stats, okay? Everyone's level up stats in this game are linear. It's not like Final Fantasy IV, where it randomly decided what stat ups you get, and you had to save before each level up to try and make sure you actually didn't screw up your stats. At least if you're doing the really high-end stuff, which obviously you probably aren't because you didn't need to in FF4. But I'm moving on. Hey, Simone. Yeah, I saw that, Jonko, and it's freaking horrifying. So the stats are all static, but you have and I'll talk about how that's awesome later. I'm not going to put it in there, but I'm only mentioning this because if you leveled up 3 times and had Tritalk equipped all 3 of those times, that is 12 additional magic power stat, which is a significant amount, considering 255 is the cap, right? So that's a decent chunk. Let's say you die, go back to your save point. Well, your level is retained. Your current experience marker is retained, so you are still 3 levels up. However, that 12 magic power is gone, because that's separate, that's tracked separately. All that's saved from a coding perspective is the experience value, and again, because everyone's level ups are static in what stat ups you get at each level, in other words, you can fully predict everyone's stats at everyone's levels without Magicite being involved, it just sets it to there. Make sense? So, so that's another niggle there I just want to share. However, the fact that you do retain levels is a fantastic system, and the reason why is very simple. Let's say you're not that good at these RPGs, or let's say you don't want to spend a lot of time grinding, or let's say you're not sure what you're doing, or let's say you've never played this game before, or you've never played an RPG before, or a JRPG before. Let's say you're going through a particularly difficult area, like the Esper Cave on the way to the end point of the first half of the game, right? When you're going after Kefka in the cave, right? Except you don't know you're going after Kefka. You know the scene I'm talking about. You know that damn cave, right? I know several people, including me, who when we first played this game thought of that cave as frickin' hell. One of the hardest dungeons of the game. So you're going through that cave, and you're still new at this game, or just having an issue, or you're not being able to concentrate, or you don't really know what you're doing, and you die, but you saved outside. So you don't lose progress. That's the key point. I have emphasized this for years and years and years. Yeah, I did too, Volksem. I had that exact same problem you just mentioned. I was stuck on the minecart escape and couldn't get out, and I had no tents, and I ended up just kind of leveling my way out through this method I'm about to, through the maintaining of stuff. But anyways, I have said for years and years that you need to have a way to maintain at least some progress in a game. Games, one of the most important things about any video game, about any interactive medium, is progression. If you are playing a game and you do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then you lose, or you fail, or you screw up, the vast majority of players are going to be pissed off, irritable, frustrated, and otherwise not enjoying themselves if they have to go all the way back to A. Make sense? Now, I'm not saying that's a 100% rule. There is a place and a time for that. It's called hardcore mode, and it should be an optional thing. If I want to reset all my progress, if I want to have that added danger of all that, that should be an optional thing, and I agree with that fully. I'm one of those people who liked playing hardcore mode over in Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. And other games that have that kind of an option, you know, the once-ever-death thing. I actually did a kind of thing like that in TIE Fighter. Actually, to give you an idea, you know, the first time I lost my craft, I'd end the save and start over, right? But the point is that should be an optional thing, not a default part of gameplay. But a lot of games include resetting back, you know, losing all progress as an actual functional method of gameplay. I can give you a direct example of this, Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 1 did this in a way, so let's say you are in a mission. That's what they called them. And you're like 90% of the way through the mission, and one of the players that you're in the group with accidentally pulled an extra pack. So now you're fighting 2 packs at once instead of just the one, and you die. All of your progress is lost. All of it. If you're trying to do the bonus optional stuff too, all the effort you put into going out of your way and doing the optional bonus stuff is also gone because you only get credit for that when you finish the mission. And that's just frustrating. So that's why I like this method. It's like a halfway method. You keep your exp, you lose other things. So one way or another, you're still progressing, and you have the option of kind of keeping going. It's actually what I have heard other players nowadays refer to as the Dark Souls effect. If you keep bashing your head into the boss, eventually you'll get through, right? And of course, like I said, the all-important maintaining progression thing, which I really, really like. So, woo! God, I have been playing this game for 1 hour and 3 minutes, and I'm here. That's just my style, isn't it? Love the fires, love the little glows around the fires. Boss fight. Now, as I've mentioned, every single other enemy in this entire game, up to this point in time, we can literally one-shot. There's nothing we have not been able to one-shot. This is the only exception to this rule. Now, this is interesting because I know some people would argue this is a bad thing. I disagree, and I'm going to try and explain why. Any of you who hasn't seen this cutscene, they actually mention in character... Shut up, Samurai. What do you want from me, man? They actually mention in character the concept of weaknesses and retaliation attacks and that kind of a thing, right? And I want to mention that in character thing again because that's important. In other words, these guys mention all of this stuff as if they were briefed on it before they were sent on this mission, as opposed to just a guy popping in and saying, "Hey, so you know, tutorialization." That's not why I'm okay with this, though. I mean, that helps. Why I'm okay with this is they only do this once. Actually, no, that's not true. They actually do this 3 times in the course of the game. Here, Chatternook in the G-Door section. That's not G-Door. The art house. And once with Rexol at the end of Science Quest. All 3 of these times, they have a little bit of a blurb before the fight, trying to explain some of the mechanics of the fight. And I like this. And again, I'm going to try to explain for 2 reasons. One, because they don't do it that often. They don't do it every freaking fight. But they also do it here so you get the idea, the very concept of maybe I shouldn't just attack whatever. Maybe I shouldn't try and, you know, just AoE. Maybe I shouldn't just try and spam Ultima over and over, or Bioblast over and over, or whatever, right? Make sense? Second reason I like it, though, this is not WoW. I know you're like, well, what does that have to do with anything? In WoW, we learn boss mechanics by dying. Now, okay, that's not actually true anymore. I mean, nowadays you've got all the guides and people who do exactly that. But back in the day, and I don't mean to sound nostalgic, but back in the day, the way you learned a boss mechanics is you just went up into the fight and you paid attention. And he would do something, and you'd be like, okay, well, let's figure out why he did that. Okay, well, he did that in reaction to this, so we know not to do that now. In a game like an MMO, you can die, and that's okay, because you'll just get up at the Spirit Healer or whatever, run back, and try again, right? In a game like FF6, you die, you go back to that save point, which may or may not be a while back, right? Make sense? In other words, a little bit of an explanation is okay in a single-player RPG like this. Oh, yeah, that is true, Psychotic. You're absolutely right on that. But in a single-player RPG like this, it's much more acceptable to be like, hey, I think something's going on with his shoulder, or, oh, here's a monster that eats lightning, you know, in order to try and explain some of the mechanics of a boss away, so the player just doesn't run into a sudden screw you. And that's my personal perspective on that. That's not like, I'm not going to say that's the definitive gaming design thing, but in my opinion, there's actually a term for it. I'm just going to say it's called asshole traps, okay? Forgive me for the curse, but asshole traps are when you do something that the player doesn't expect or shouldn't expect and has no warning of. There's been no lead up to it. There's been no tutorial about it. There's been no hints. It's just all of a sudden, screw you! A lot of games in modern eras do this. A lot of games are specifically designed to this. Most punishing platformers, that's a genre right there. Most punishing platforms go out of their way to do exactly that. I'll give you the next line. and that's fine for those types of games, but for other types of games, I would argue that those kind of asshole traps are exactly what they sound like. That they're just, no. This is the kind of situation where you want to have some kind of forewarning or adventure before someone just kind of flicks you across the nose just to be a dick. That's my opinion. But whatever. Also, hop, hop, hop. Now this is what it looks like when I turn. You notice I mentioned this is the short command style. So the menu is completely different here. You see this? And I turned off the ATB. Now turning off the ATB, as you can see over there, shows my max HP and my current HP instead of the ATB bar. Again, options. Options good. I don't know when my turn's up, but I do know my max health. Oh, they're just sleeping a bit. Although, while we're at it, that's a good time. Oh, I'm out of MP. I can't show it off. Oh, maybe I can. Okay, so you see how they have the status wound or KO, depending on which version you're playing, or just dead. Their status effects will actually show there on the left, which is another little situation of useful interface information. Like, oh, well, this is their status effect. There's exact status effect. If you don't happen to know what it looks like or don't happen to know what it is, you can be like, aha, they're poisoned, they're petrified, you know, whatever, stopped, etc. And I suppose I have the health to show this off. So just in case you're wondering, there is a penalty for hitting the shell. That penalty is Megavolt. It does about 60 damage. If you're at full health, that will not kill you. If you're not, it probably will kill you. As you can see, I can't actually survive another hit from that right now. However, leads me to one other good thing they did, which I'll show off in just a moment. Damn it, Javin, come back! I'm streaming at super low quality, man, because I'm on a wireless. Yeah, I'm on wireless, by the way. And yeah, the unintentional dickery of the Scorpion boss in FF7. Make sure to shoot it at the wrong time! Yeah, anyway, so this is another thing. I actually meant to mention this earlier. They give you a free heal. Now, I don't know if you understand what that means, but in most RPGs, especially in this era, it all boils down to resources or ammunition, or however you want to think of that. In other words, what you do not have, you have finite resources, right? You have finite MP, you have finite items, you have finite gold. All of these are finite resources. Now, and we're done. Yeah, it only takes 3 tech missiles to bring down Welk. He is not a hard boss. He is literally a tutorial boss. And so a lot of playing any RPG strategizing, and I don't mean like deep strategizing, like, you know, a speedrunner or a task, whatever. Although this affects those too, is all about your ammunition, your resources, what exactly you have and how much of it you have. Um, I'd like to go on the record and say I both like and dislike the run mechanic. I'll talk about that in a minute. Anyways, so a lot of that playstyle is, okay, how much MP do I have, how much mana do I have? They give you a free heal. There are very few free attacks in this game, but each one is valuable in its own right, and indeed valuable for the section in which you get it. No, it is not Darkrai, but I'm going to push it from Twitch to YouTube. I don't have the ability to save locally. Yes, Scene, that is exactly what this is. A full tilt review of a game. I've never done a review of FF6. So giving you a full-on free attack, like auto crossbow. I mentioned that earlier. Tools are free. They don't cost anything. You just use them infinitely. So, wells of healing, all like 7 of them in the entire game. Those are free. Instant free heals, infinite, right? The Magitek armor stuff, free, infinite, no resource cost, right? They give you that on purpose as a buffer to get you used to the idea of things like healing and damaging, so that when you lose those in about 10 seconds here, when I actually start hitting A again, then what you have is the understanding that, okay, now I have limited resources, or possibly the lack of understanding about that, but then it'll hit you and it's like, oh, okay, so I'm screwed, right? Hey, Limplord. Another neat feature, I've talked about this in the speedrun before, if I hold down A, this is frame-perfect text advanced. Don't have to mash A at all. Now, this is only true in combat, because the way the combat engine actually works. So, like I said, I can just literally hold down A here, and the text will advance in a frame-perfect manner. It will go as fast as possible to do. And it's very convenient when you're speedrunning this game, or replaying it. Nice little touch. So, end of Act 1. That's the prologue. We're done with that. Now it's time to start figuring out what the hell's going on. Up until this point in time, our main character, Terra Brandford, has not said a single word in the entire time. And this is a good storytelling mechanism for 2 reasons. One is the obvious, and I already talked about that. That's the en medias res thing. The second, we now have a situation where Terra knows as little about her as we do. Now, I know, amnesia main character is a cliche. I'm not arguing that. I absolutely agree, and I absolutely agree that it's overused. However, cliches are not necessarily bad. If a cliche is executed properly, then that's awesome. I don't know how else to explain it. That's awesome that they do that. A cliche that is properly executed is great. And I really like it when it's done properly. It is, now, let me explain why. It's never enough, this is a review. I'm trying to go into detail. So why is it I think they executed it properly in this case? Because Terra here, her character arc is all about finding herself. That is Terra's character arc. And that has nothing to do with her amnesia. However, her amnesia ties into that beautifully. You know? I agree, by the way. Planescape Torment is a great example of amnesia character done very, very properly. Anyways, the amnesia ties into her character arc without it being dependent on it. In other words, it would still be the same character arc without amnesia. Make sense? Second point here, the amnesia allows her to explore her nature without really going into her character, her past, her history, to try and figure out what kind of a person she is now with a blank sheet, which again is also part of her character growth and development. Final point, she never actually is healed with the amnesia on her own. It can be argued, and has been argued, and I will argue, that Terra is never actually cured of her amnesia. Now I know what you're going to say, well that's ridiculous. Hear me out. Terra has never, in the entire game, demonstrates a knowledge of memories of her life other than from this moment, right here, the exact second we're at in the game, up until the end of the game, and events that happened before her birth and when she was still a baby, and that's it. I have always postulated that what actually happens is instead of her amnesia being healed, she receives the information and knowledge and memories from Meduan, her father, from his magicite. That's why when we go back to the flashback, it's not Terra's flashback. It's Meduan's flashback. We play as Meduan. We see his time before he even met Madonna, before he ever gave birth to Terra. Well, she ever gave birth to Terra. Maybe Espers give birth as males. I don't know. That's the third reason why I think the amnesia is handled well, because it's never actually handled. She never recovers in the strictest sense. She never is cured. Let me put it more accurately. Instead, she learns to live with it. She learns to move on and form her new life and her new self regardless. Which I think is awesome, and, let's just to keep going with this, also ties in with one of the biggest themes of FF6. I'd say the second biggest theme, which is exactly that. Handling your past, moving on, trying to make anew despite what has happened. Locke is another excellent example of a character who goes through that same kind of a thing. So is Edgar, so Sabin, so Cyan. It's everywhere. Gao. So these are my reasons why I personally believe that the amnesia is well received. I hope I just answered your question over the last several minutes, because I was trying to explain exactly why I felt the amnesia was well done in this case. Now, we're going to go ignore Arvis completely. Exactly, Baronessa, exactly. This new Terra is a different person, fundamentally and functionally. This is a new person, but she never... It's not a bad thing that it's a new person, you know? One could argue they did the same damn thing with Revan over in KOTOR. The second Revan is a brand new person. Okay, I just want to make sure you heard it seen, so I don't have to... But yeah, the new Revan is a new individual, a new person. And he builds his own new personality and his new perspective based on his experience in this new thing. By the way, hey, Jawok, what's up? FF6! So... I want to pause for a moment and explain a couple of things that I think is really cool. First of all, you know, it just occurs to me, I've actually, that's also possible, Volxima. That is a totally new possibility. I never actually thought about that. Because, you're right, it is possible that ever since she's been under the influence of that crown, which is probably since she's been a kid, she hasn't been forming memories. So she is literally a blank slate. It's not amnesia, it's absence of memory. Anyways, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, so, yeah, this is a nice fireplace. There's a carpet on the floor, so it's not just stone floor. Nice touches. There's a clock. Elixirs are in clocks. This right here is what I want to point attention to. I forget who it was. I was reading an article... an interview about one of the people who worked on FF6. This was years and years ago. I think it's on the wiki now. And, Shion? Who's that? And he was mentioning how every time they had to populate an area with doodads. I've talked about this concept before when it comes to Blizzard games. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's kind of a lengthy explanation. But basically, the little stuff that's there for decor but isn't actually necessary to anything. That's what doodads are. When they were populating certain areas of the game, and it was only what they called focal points of the game, where important events happened, or important things happened, they would go to the story designers and the setting designers and the event designers and say, okay, what is important about this room? And they'd say, well, it's this person's place and it's this character and whatnot. And so they would get an idea of what that person's like, or what happened there, or who lived there, and they would put doodads there specifically to highlight that. Now, this isn't true in everywhere in the game, but this room is one of them. You see this piece of armor right here? This is the entire purpose of this being here was so that you could see that Arvis is, I mean, it's actually wonderfully subtle, and I imagine I would love to hear anybody out there who has never caught on to this. This is here to demonstrate that Arvis used to be a soldier, a warrior, someone who was a knight, someone who had a suit of armor, who had a sword, who went out and fought. And it's up there on a stand, on a display, and he's just an old man now, right? two significance of that. One is the obvious retired adventurer thing, but the other is to, again, showcasing that idea of the new era taking over the old. The idea that this era has surpassed the idea of knights, the idea of some kind of code of honor, whatever, is old-fashioned and has no purpose in this new world. And Narsh, being one of the, I'd say the third most technologically advanced of the various city-states in the world, it would make sense that here especially, Arvis would be retired, either forcibly or because, you know, his entire order was just removed. Because they don't need knights anymore. You know? It's a cool little thing like that. I'll talk about that more when we get to Doma, too, because that whole new era taking over the old thing is all over the Doma section. So yeah, this is where they talk about the slave crown, which I just like to say is a really terrifying idea. Just the very fact that it's something called a slave crown, the fact that it just kind of takes over your mental, and IKEA apparently sells suits of armor. I should check that. There's an IKEA store that they're building. I guess like northwest of here or anything. But anyways. Now, what you mentioned earlier about her not forming memories, it is entirely possible that also explains why she knows her name and nothing else. Because she would remember her name and nothing else. Now, okay. I don't think I'm going to put this as a negative, but I am going to say this. The fact that everyone's names default to caps bugs the crap out of me. It's only true in this version. In the GBA version, in like every FF from this point on, it's like I just replaced it with, you know, capital and then lowercase. But it has always bothered me to have dialogue where it's like, and then I want Terra to go over there, and then want Terra, you know. Every time I've seen that in a default playthrough, it makes me think that they're yelling their names each time I say it. Bugs the crap out of me. But I'm not going to put that as a negative because they let you rename, and that's cool. I mean, this also does not deserve a positive. This is not the best renaming thing in the universe. I'm sorry, it isn't. There are... Yeah, exactly, Saint. There are... Ramirez! I need you to... But I like the idea that you can rename it, but I just wish there was more options with this. There are, in fact, other FFs out there with more options. Is it 7, I want to say? Another point to FF7 for having the best rename options. If I'm remembering correctly, it's got, like, in addition to the fact that it's got the most character, which I believe was 10, I want to say? 10 character limit instead of the 7, which we have here. Or no, is that... That's 6, excuse me, 6 character limit here. There was a lot of additional characters you could put in other than just alphabet, right? So that's pretty cool. You're cool, Scene. You're cool. Excuse me. You're cool, Scene! And I hope that Deacon is doing okay. I'll stop. Anyways, so... I'd also just like to say that one of the things I like about the rename character thing is I've noticed it's like 50-50, especially amongst my viewers, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. 9 character limit, thank you, Samurai. I know it was a lot. It's more than any other FF game. I'm going to pause on this because I want to talk something about this story here. But anyways, Panon! I've noticed about half the people that I talk to about games like these don't rename them or do what I just did, you know, get rid of the cap. So it's just Terra. So it's Terra, so it's Locke, Edgar, etc., right? And I'd love to hear which one of these you do, because the other thing that people tend to do is rename them. And I've seen dozens and dozens of things. I've seen people who rename characters after themselves and their friends in real life. Again, going back to Vincent, Vincent and Joel and we all three tend to do that often. So, you know, I would rename a character Vincent, I'd then rename this character Joel, and so forth and so on. Some people would rename them just after names that they thought were cool. I actually have a save still on one of my old SNES cartridges of FF6 that has a save where I have renamed every character after a major villain in the FF series. So, you know, we're running around with Kefka and Seth and X-Death and Edea, all that kind of thing, right? And apparently, and see, it looks like we've got a nice spread again, because I see some people who don't rename them, like a dead there, and Samurai doesn't, and then yet Seened also likes to rename those. I vary, if anybody's curious. I like to vary my preference. Sometimes I do one, sometimes I do the other. It depends on my mood. We're going to keep it this way for the review purposes. Oh, right, I wanted to talk about this. So, this is interesting in several lights. One of the questions I always found myself asking, and I could only extrapolate on this, is how did they know she was here? Now, you might be like, well, they're right there. I mean, come on. You know, of course she's right there. Well, it's not quite what I mean by that. Because if they knew she was there easily, if they could find out she was there easily, why didn't they find out earlier? She's obviously been laying here for a bit. She was obviously found in the mines, in the ruins of the Magitech armor that was left up there, and dragged back here, probably by Arvis, and so, you know, put here in order to recover. So, I mean, why did it take them several days to find her? And in that case, why did they find her at all? It's a question I've always wondered about that. Personally, Rowan, I think they're going to do a retroactive continuity thing. I'll answer you really quick here. It could be multiple of those. In other words, depending on how you play, it's a cryotube. Depending on how you play, it's a clone, etc. That's my take on it. However they're not doing that, it's probably just cryotube. That's the most likely thing, I think. Now, that also makes the question of why Arvis knew to come in after them. Well, that's actually a lot easier. And in addition to the fact that we've already established he's an ex-soldier of some kind, he probably was trying to scout out and figure out what the heck the Magitech armors were up to in the caves. And when he got back there, he didn't, he found the remains of a battle, a bunch of destroyed Magitech armors on the ground, and a young woman who seemed virtually untouched but was unconscious on the ground with a slave crown on her head. Another interesting note. How does Arvis know what a slave crown is? No, I'm not suggesting something pervy. I'm actually suggesting something terrifying. I've always believed that the reason it was something that they could actually understand and know what it was and how to get it off her is because the Empire had been using them here and there to the point where at least members of the Returners are aware of exactly what slave crowns are. And that's terrifying. However, you also have to admit, that is very much like the Gestalian Empire. I'm pretty sure that's right up their alley. Also kind of puts a new light on the way that they conscript soldiers from the sounds they conquer, doesn't it? Anyways, so we've covered that. We've covered how they come here. One of the other things, this dialogue is not the best, if I'm being blunt. The previous line of dialogue that I accidentally skipped through and this one are not the best because the way it's phrased, some people have actually interpreted that this is actually the Empire that has come to reclaim their soldier and their armor. And that's not true, obviously. This is Narsh. We see them outside. It's Narsh and the dogs. So Narsh soldiers are the ones who actually are searching for this situation and searching for her, searching for the armor. Only if they're a posse, Javan. Now, go ahead and zip past this here for a second. Of course, Terra has no idea what any of this is. Now, you notice, here's the other thing. Arvis is automatically on her side. This is just more fuel to the fire that he understands what slave crowns are, because he would understand that she is a literal innocent here. He understands that, because he's with the Returners, because he has the inside info on what the Empire's been doing with these things. He knows she is not their enemy. She is not a soldier or an individual of the Empire. Also, lol, seen. I mention this because the soldiers, obviously, he assumes, would not understand. Would not understand that she's an innocent, would not understand what a slave crown is, and would not be willing to think rationally in a situation where they just had dozens of their friends get butchered by her. Now, I know all this sounds obvious, but it's just nicely presented, I think. Especially since none of it really has to be explained. The audience can just look at it and say, aha, because of the way they talk about this. So, of course, we try to escape. However, they notice us immediately. And of course they do. We're literally up on this bridge for all to see. It would be really hard for them not to see us. Also note, this is just my interpretation. I've always assumed Terra is basically uneasily walking, if you know what I mean, through this section. You know, she's not just like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. She's just gotten out of this. She has no idea what's going on. She's told to go into the mines. It's like, okay, what? Go out this route. Okay. Huh? There's people here. I don't understand. Are these bad people? You know, so I like the impression of her. Like, if this was a movie, this section, if I was directing it, I would have the camera angle be a little fisheye, just a little bit. Probably have some, you know, going on, so that you get the impression that Terra here is just not with it at all, not cognizant, not capable, not cohesive, etc. And yes, it would be seen. I will not argue that. Another save point. Chests. We'll talk about chests later. I need to change back to the... I can actually see my ATB bar, because I much prefer that version. Oh, excuse me. Gauge on. And window, there we go. Yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about this now. There's nothing in the entire game that says this. I can't decide if this is a good or bad game design. Honestly, I'm leaning towards bad, just not horrible. I don't think this deserves a negative. Feel free to argue with me if you think. Hey, Torin. What's up, man? That chest over there has an item that's stupid in it. I don't even remember what it is. When I come through here in a few hours, or how long it's going to take me, with Edgar, Terra, and Bannon, that if I have not picked it up, that chest's contents will have changed. And for a couple of chests, I don't remember if this is one of them. I think it is. In fact, I know it is. For a couple of chests, including this one and the one in South Figaro, those contents will change yet again in the World of Ruin. It's a potion. So there's nothing that says that anywhere. There's no, guide. There's no hint. There's no, if you leave the item there, it'll get better in the future. And that's why I dislike that. Because they have the chest just sitting. These are also the first chests. These two chests right here. That one and right there. I got both of them on the screen. These are the first two chests we encounter in the entire game. They are clearly chests. Good sprite work. They're clearly, it's clearly separate. It's clearly something that doesn't fit with the rest of the mine. So even if you don't recognize that as a chest, you're probably likely to go up to it and try and see what it is. And then, it's a thing, okay. And then you go pick up the other one, because of course you do. You don't have to be a loot whore to try and loot these chests. So I do think this is a bad gameplay thing. I'm not sure it deserves a negative for that. So Titan's vote doesn't actually matter. So he doesn't count. But, see, and it is a secret. You're right, Javan. That's the thing. It is clearly a secret. It is clearly something that is there as like a little, bonus. But I don't think that deserves an actual negative mark. That's just my take on that. If you think you can argue against that, please do. Also, this is a linear corridor. I'm just pointing it out. It looks like I can go a few places. I actually can't. That's an interesting argument, Sand. Got her. Uh-oh. Notice she moves faster here, by the way. I point that out because it's another nice little tidbit of showcasing just how panicked she is as the Narsh soldiers corner her into the unstable cave area where she falls and passes out. Now, it was mentioned the lack of memories while she has the crown on. This is a interesting perspective because obviously this kind of contradicts that. We have a flashback, a memory of Terra here with Kefka putting this crown on her. And then she remembers another incident, God knows how many years or months or whatever later. We also don't know how old she is here, by the way. It is implied she's pretty young here. Not 18 like she is when the game starts, but I mean young. Like, possibly not even a teenager yet, young, when she first had that slave crown put on her. We don't know for sure. We probably never will. It's just implied. This is also our second shot of Kefka. By the way, I just feel like pointing out, for those of you who don't know, Kefka's the first character we see in the entire game. No joke. Way back at the intro, he's the very first person we see. Now, this scene... Excuse me, loot enthusiast. This scene... Whoa, no, I don't want to advance text. There we go. This scene is interesting because it gets across several things very clearly and easily. First of all, notice Celis is there. Now, only someone who's paying attention, or is replaying the game, is going to notice Celis there. Same with General Leo. But now, I point this out, though, because both of them have unique sprites, so you can't really mistake them for anyone else if you're paying attention. However, there's also the filter on it, so it's harder to pay attention, and as you can see, the text is kind of covering it. I point this out because I think this is good foreshadowing, personally. The fact that we see... the way this scene is directed, the way this camera angle is shot, for lack of a better way to put that, because obviously there's no real camera here, really gets across the point. Those are all just soldiers down the bottom. They all have the same sprite. They're all lined up in a row. This gentleman here with the long hair and the mustache or beard or whatever he's got going on is obviously some kind of leader, and the people in the back are his upper echelons. We get all that without a single word of dialogue. We could get all of that without anything. This could all be a silent scene, and we'd still get that from the visual presentation, right? Also notice that Terra is sitting right next to a Magitech armor. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But again, I like this as a nice, tiny little bit of foreshadowing, especially because, and I know this is going to sound stupid, but back in the day when this game first came out... Oh, excuse me. Ugh. I don't know about you guys, but me and my friends didn't know Kefka was the villain. I mean, he was obviously an awesome character. Ugh. Yeah, I agree, Javan. That's another excellent decision there for the design of this scene. What in the world? There we go. There, okay. Yes, Choco's trying to distract the heck out of me. So yeah, they did use... I'm going to mention that out loud for anybody who isn't watching chat. They used a transparent text box so you can see those characters back there. So again, we didn't actually know if Kefka was the villain. And so there was a lot of theories because we all assumed Gestalt wasn't the villain. We all kind of assumed that. The man behind the man is an old enough trope that we kind of assumed he was just the front guy, right? However, we didn't know which one of those guys in the back was the actual villain. Was Leo the real villain? Was Kefka... Well, we don't even know his... Oh, yeah, we know his name by this point. Was Kefka the real villain? Was Celis the real villain? It was also a theory that was being tossed around by David, I want to say, that Terra was actually the real villain of the game, and that when her amnesia was cured, she would, be like, oh my god, I'm the one who did all this stuff, that kind of thing. And here, making this very, very clear and obvious, now you can fully see those three characters behind him. Kefka, Leo, Celis. But one really funny, subtle, quiet thing. This is beautiful. Look at the timing on how they're waving their hands. Leo's, Celis's, and the soldiers is synced with each other. Kefka's is not synced with anyone else. You see that? I'm going to leave it up here for a little more second so you can see it. It's just a little bit offset, so occasionally it looks like it's synced up, and then it'll fall behind. There, like that. See that? And then it'll catch back up a little bit. It's oscillating, excuse me. I always say that word wrong. That is so cool that they bothered to do that. Kefka's the only one that's off sync from everyone else. Tell me that isn't awesome. Just tell me that isn't awesome. That they did something so quiet and so simple. How many of you have noticed that? Genuine question. Because this is not the first time I've seen that. God, I love this game. Fade to black. Time to introduce our second character. I've heard people argue many, many, many times who the main character is of this game. And of course, Terra is usually the one everyone argues primarily for. But there's three other characters I tend to hear most often argued are the main characters. These include Locke, Edgar, and Celis. And because he's off step, Titans, He's different from everyone else. You can extrapolate on that however you want, but the message is clear. This guy, Kafka over there, is different from everyone else. He is not in step. He is not in sync with the rest of them. Anyway, so here we have Locke, arguably one of the main characters. And of course, how goes the robbering and plundering trade? This is our very first shot of Locke, and this is beautifully subtle because, as we know, Locke probably has the second most tragic backstory. Well, yeah, I'd say second most tragic backstory of all the main characters, only surpassed by Cyan because Cyan's entire life is tragedy. Anyways, I mention this, though, because one of the things I've pointed out many times about Locke, and this is definitely me repeating myself because I've said this like 5 times before, that I love about his character is the fact that he constantly is trying to play this goofball, you know, I mean, look at it. This is how we're introduced to him. Whoa, look at that expression. And he constantly says, you know, I'm not a thief, I'm a treasure hunter. And it's that double lie, because he's actually lying by telling the truth, holding up the mask of what he really is, getting all upset. No, he actually was a treasure hunter, you know? He actually was a treasure hunter, and then he let go of all that garbage because of what happened to Rachel and blah, blah, blah. And so now he gets all defensive about it, so he can hide about it. You know, you get where I'm going with this. So this is a great way for us, the audience, to be tricked in this same way. Damn it, Baronessa. Gogo actually is the only character in the game. This entire game has been performed by Gogo as a theater thing. But no, so I like the fact that even the game is trying to trick us into thinking that Locke is this goofball, lighthearted character when he is anything but. We do have some goofball characters in this game, definitely. One of the things I love about the old FFs, and I've said this many, many times, is they have a lot of silly factor. I talked about this when it came to the FF7 remake. FF7's a very silly game. I mean, it's got a lot of serious awesomeness to it, and it's got a lot of epicness to it, but it's also got a lot of silly, just random weirdness to it. And that's one of the hallmarks of the older FFs, and one of the things I hope comes forward into the remake. FF6 is no exception to that. FF6 has a lot of blah to it. I mean, for God's sakes, Realm. You know, I prefer the term treasure hunting. I've already talked about this. And he plays the fool. Yeah, FF5, the goofy version. Also known as the most serious, evil, and screwed up one of all the FFs. Which also happens to be the goofiest. So, this is interesting in its own right here. Arvis knows about the control thing, right? Arvis knows about the slave crown and all that fun stuff. Oh, I'll go over this in a second, because this is actually a negative mark. Arvis is like, okay, you know, we need to help her, she's an innocent, blah, blah, blah. And he explains this over the course of the next few dialogues to Locke. Now, the interesting thing is, Locke is initially, oh my god, because, and the implication here, and it's mentioned earlier than this as well, it's actually been mentioned twice up until now, and including this point, the implication is that Terra has a reputation. And of course she does. Terra was killing Imperial troops on Kefka's orders. You notice they never emphasize that, by the way. They mention that she killed a bunch of our own troopers, and then we see a scene where Kefka is encouraging her to burn people who are clearly Imperial troopers. And that's all they ever say about that. That's our very first peek into Kefka's mindset, that he would willingly control her to burn and murder like over 50 troops in a minute, or whatever the actual statistic is, just to showcase his new toy, just to prove that the slave crown works. I was always under the impression when I was younger that it was because she broke out, or because she was, you know, she got free and was like, ah. No, we clearly see, based on how those scenes line up together, that Kefka was actually aiming her like a freaking gun at his own troops, because, hey, it's fun. And again, very Kefka. But I'm getting off topic. The point here, though, is that Terra obviously has a significant reputation as this horrible death machine witch thing, and Locke himself calls her a witch. Remember, this is an era where magic is barely whispered about. See you around, Jaywalk. Where magic is the kind of thing that's, you know, the stuff of legends. It'd be like trying to say that, oh my, you know, there's someone in real life modern era is a dragon, and it's like, oh, okay, whatever. We're not going to believe that. Of course we're not. Dragon, well, okay, dragon's a bad example because dragons have never existed, but, you know, something like that, something that's from legend, something that's from the ancient history and probably wasn't actually real, and then all of a sudden there's this woman who supposedly has this weird magitech, weird magic crap stuff of whatever she's doing. You can see how that would get a reputation. I think Hojo is an idiot. I don't actually think he's insane. I don't think he has that excuse. I have always had the opinion, personally, that Hojo is not insane. He is just evil and creepy. Moving on. And an idiot who tries to compensate for that idiocy. So, okay, this is a negative, okay? Debating if I'm going to put this as a story negative, as an actual negative on the thing there. However, look at this line right here. Our independence can only be assured if we join forces with the Returners, an underground resistance movement. This line is actually a Woolseyism. This is translated differently in the original and in the GBA text, which is good because this is bad writing 101. If I'm a network engineer, we'll use something from actual past, and I'm talking to Christian, who is also a network engineer, and I say to Christian, as you know, a network involves different computers that connect to each other on wires either on a local or external network. Christian says, of course, I understand that, because that's my frickin' job. Why are you telling me this? That's bad exposition. That is bad exposition. I'm sorry. And so this is a classic example of bad exposition. This is the, as you know, is actually what this is referred to. As you know, networking involves da-da-da-da-da-da. And so, I'm going to go ahead and ding this. I'm going to go ahead and ding this. I personally feel that those dialogue boxes would have been better spent with him trying to explain what a slave crown is to Locke, so Locke can then just say, "Oh, okay." And yeah, the very name Returners is very evocative. Now, go ahead and do this. So there we go. We have lost a story point. It's our very first actual negative here. That's another thing. I like the name Returners. It's probably my favorite Resistance / Rebel / whatever name ever. Not just because from its FF6, but because everything that it implies makes perfect sense, and it's... I just get tired of things being called the Rebels every now and again, you know? Oops. Back to the game. There we go. I also like the idea that these soldiers who... This is kind of cool. Okay, she... You know what? I actually really have to go to the bathroom. I'm sorry, guys. I'll be right back. I like that example too, Baroness. As you know, we've been friends since I was 3. Yeah, bad exposition, like I said. Sorry, it was getting hard to concentrate there. The thing I like about this is this gives us an insight into the competency of Locke, and also is the tiniest little bit of a hint of what he was like, and leads into his character arc. Because, remember, the soldiers knew where she fell. They knew the exact spot where she fell down in the mine, and therefore would be able to track her in their own mine quickly and easily, right? They knew where to go. Locke, who knew nothing other than the fact that she was in this general vicinity of the, in the general vicinity of where she is, manages to actually find her first, only by a few seconds, but still. Nice little touch there. There we go. Whoops, I need to do this. There we go. And there's one other thing that makes FF6 awesome, and I think Javan will agree on this. FF6 has these things. I don't know who these things are, but I think they're awesome. Apparently they say Kupo a lot, and possibly Kupopo. I'm not sure, but yeah. Optional tutorial. Now this is something I agree should be tutorialized. You get the dialogue, use us to save Terra from the guards. Need more info? Yes, no. Again, any tutorial that is optional is going to bug me a hell of a lot less than a tutorial that's forced. And I actually do think this is a good idea to tutorialize this, because this information, it would be very, very, very difficult to get across the information of switching between the parties and using the 3 different groups in order to move around without just saying 3 different groups, use Y to switch between them, defeat the commander before he reaches, or else. And notice it's only 2 lines. 2 lines of dialogue to explain that whole thing. You know? So, yeah, I'm totally okay with that kind of tutorialization, personally. Now, then there's this thing you can do. I've shown this off many, many times as I've sped around this game. Funny little trick. Has to do with how they trigger the battles, basically. I've always suspected the code they were using for these sections, because this game was being developed alongside Chrono Trigger, was used to try and in Chrono Trigger in order to help distinguish the encounter based on tile method that Chrono Trigger used rather than the random encounter thing that they did. Just my take on it. Now we're going to go ahead and take that off. Oops. No, I want this shield too. There we go. I'm going to demonstrate the A thing I've been talking about here. I'm just going to hold down A. Just holding down the button. You notice in some cases the cursor doesn't even show up because it's just blazing through so fast. And gone. Another nice thing. I do like this from a gameplay perspective, even though it doesn't... Oh, I agree, Samurai. Even though it doesn't fully have anything to do lore-wise with the fact that you kill the leader, the battle's over. This is true in the Kefka phase fight later on, when I end the Kefka race. You know what I'm talking about. Another nice little thing is a lot of people assumed the Moogles were just there as a cameo and didn't think there would actually be Moogles present in the rest of the game. Admittedly, I wish Mog had more character stuff. He really only has like 2 character moments in the entire game, and that sucks. If I had one complaint about FX6 that didn't involve the damned random encounters, it's the fact that some of the characters just do not get enough screen time and character time. Now this is interesting, okay? First of all, she says she's wondering what happened and asking if he saved him. He immediately says, "Save your thanks for the Moogles." I know this is probably me reading too much into this, but at the same time, I don't really think that. I mean, this is FF6. We know how much effort they put into this damn game. Locke, the man with the guilt complex from hell, only surpassed by Cyan, is the kind of person who would immediately be like, "Nope. You know, I didn't do anything." Now, granted, the Moogles actually were very much responsible for the success in that battle, both in lore and in gameplay. However, that doesn't change the fact that even if it had just been Locke, I imagine he would just been like, "No, I didn't do anything." Because it's so... He's the kind of person who would beat himself up over not being able to do enough. You know what I mean? However, there's another line that's much more important. You see that line right there? I can't remember anything, past or present. Do note that he is the one who assumes she has amnesia. Now again, we don't actually know. She might actually have amnesia. She might have the lack of memory production. There are several options here. But the point is, we don't specifically know that. It is he who leads to that assumption because Locke has experience with amnesia. That's part of his myth. That's part of his backstory. It's actually the majority of his backstory has to do with amnesia. But one of the biggest reasons why I think she doesn't have amnesia in the strictest sense of the word is he assures her, several other people assure her that her memory will come back, and as we've already established, it never does. At no point in time does her memory ever come back. Amnesia can not be cured, but, you know, it is likely, especially in a fictional setting, for it to be so. As which happened with Rachel. Rachel's amnesia was cured, remember? And, of course, Locke says right there, I will not leave you until your memory returns. Now, that's an interesting promise that he makes, because... Yeah, exactly, Javan. It's an interesting promise Locke makes, because he doesn't actually keep that promise. But again, that's mostly because she never actually recovers. Now, this is neat. I have control over here, right? Okay, I can move around. Well, being an enterprising player, I'm like, well, what happens if I go back here? Now, notice they move you right where you need to go. All you need to do is go down 2 squares. Yeah, see, you can't go back. All you need to go is down 2 squares. I could go down over here, too, and leave as well. But they do 2 interesting things. They leave the door wide open. I mean, that gate is just up there. And they've got a guy standing out there now. He wasn't there before. Remember, we've seen this. Hey, Legend Caller. We've seen this scene when we came through here last time. That guy's new. So we'll show off what happens when we go through the door first. We see random townsfolk now who are recovering, and this guy's like, who are you? And we're like, oh, shoot. And then this is cool, because this is the first time he really makes the point of we should head south to Figaro. Specific directions and a specific area of where we're going towards. I've always felt personally that you weren't actually supposed to go south. I mean, you can, because again, it's linear. But the game is trying to, again, mask that linearity by encouraging you to explore and see that, you know, go up and see what happens, and then get, oh, well, we should go to Figaro. And then you are not forced to go there, although you are. You're encouraged. You see the deception there? But again, let's talk to this guy. I said I'd mention this, too. Think of us as your advisors. This is pretty much a full-on, this does not exist in lore. This classroom is an absolute absence of lore thing. But I'm okay with that. And the same reason I'm okay with this, because they did this in FF4 as well. And in FF5. That's right, I had to think about that. In FF4 and FF5, there was a tutorial room. Actually, there was one in FF7, too. And if I'm not mistaken, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the only ones that actually had a tutorial room. 8 had that damn quiz, which can go screw itself. 9, I don't think, had anything. I'm not actually sure about that one. But either way, so you go in here and he's, you know, he explains what a water spring is, and springs are located throughout the world. Bam! Instant free heal. Or you can just hold down A and do that if you're weird. There's the guy behind the desk, who's like, he explains the same thing. Oh yeah, you're right, 9 had the Mogster, so there you go. 4 through 9, that doesn't surprise me. And you go into this room, which is environmental science. A little pop-up shows up at the top there. And who's this guy? If you select wait from the battle mode, you can take all the time you need to select possible items without being attacked. Battle tactics. And then this room, go out and get some experience before coming in here. In other words, this is for people who are, you know, advanced battle tactics. This is some more advanced stuff. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, because there's no reason to, but the point is, these guys will explain all the little stuff that it's really difficult to actually understand without just going through it, right? So, cool stuff. And again, I'm okay with this. And I'm kind of okay with this for the reason I was okay with the save point thing. It's all pretty brief. It all is stuff that you probably would not be able to learn otherwise. Like, for example, this guy explains what Life 3 does, for God's sakes. Yeah, you know what? This definitely is a plus to gameplay, this tutorial room. I actually agree with that fully. It's funny how gameplay is so far up. I guess it's because I don't know when to give pluses to story. Do I give a plus to story for the fact that Locke has already started his character arc? For the fact that Terra doesn't actually have amnesia? Should I give a plus to story for the fact that Kefka was different? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so, it's all brief, it's all quick, and it's all relevant. You know, it explains what morph is. It explains what dance and rage are and how those function. You really wouldn't get basically all this stuff, with a few exceptions, if not for the fact that this room was here. And again, and I want to stress this because this is really important, 100% optional. That's really, really important. You know, button assignment. There's another plus here, by the way, that is really, really important. And hard to explain, really. several games, especially in this era, and most especially in the NES era. This is bad in the NES era. It's actually there's actually a trope for this. It's called all there in the manual, although that's mostly a story thing. Too often, the gameplay stuff would be in the manual. You'd actually have to pull up the manual and be like, oh, well, this does this. This power-up functions this way. A lot of older games, I'm not talking about the real great ones, I'm talking about the majority of NES games and some early SNES games, basically required you to have the manual to figure out what the hell was going on, how the game worked, how it functioned, all that kind of thing, right? This right here, this room, well, not this specific room, but this tutorial area, ensures that even if you are playing this game and for whatever reason don't have a manual, and by the way, for those of you who are around in the NES and the SNES era, you know just how hard it is, or I shouldn't say around the back then, actually it's the next era. If you're around in the PS2 and the Xbox era, you know if you're going back to buy a SNES game, right, buy a cartridge, you were most likely to buy a cartridge. The manual almost never came with it. Go on eBay right now and find, Final Fantasy VI, and it'll specifically say with manual, and 9 times out of 10, those ones with the manual will be a higher price because they're much more rare, because, blah, 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 blah. I actually went to a store once, forever ago, back in Topeka. Yeah, no kidding, Jovan. Back in Topeka, there was a store that just sold video game manuals. It was copies of them. He had a bunch of manuals, and he had a copier machine, and he would go through and copy all the pages, and then cut them out and bind them together and sell those for like $2 or $3 each. And I remember going through and just thinking of that as a gold mine. My copy of FF4's manual is the one I bought there. I don't actually have my original FF4 manual anymore. I got it from there. What else? I have a few others of those like that. And yet nowadays we've got plenty of ways to get a hold of those. But my point being, regardless, having this kind of information in the game rather than requiring a manual is good game design, which is why that got that gameplay plus over there. So again, this is linear. There's literally only 3 locations we can go to right now. Just 3. There's Figaro, the South Figaro Cave, which, if you haven't been there at the moment, has a soldier from Figaro saying, don't come here, and the Chocobo Forest, which doesn't actually lead you anywhere. Those are the only 3 places we can go to. Now, I mention that especially because I know it's kind of hard to see. Hello, 486. It's kind of hard to say, hey, Third Leg. It's hard to say, Third Leg. It's hard to see on the map, but we actually have a pretty decently huge area we can traverse in, which includes grassland, forest, desert, and a little bit of mountainous area. And in this whole area, we can only go to 3 locations. Well, 4 if you count Narsh, which I don't. I mention that because, again, this is a wonderful thing and a wonderful way to disguise linearity. We have to go to Figaro. We have to go to the castle. We've even been told, assuming we went north, we have to go to the castle. But we've got this whole area, and so one of the things I did when I first played this game is I just roamed. It's like, oh, what's over here? What's over here? I mean, I'd played FF4 before this, so it's not like I was a complete noob, and I played FF1 before this. But, I'm just like, oh, what's over here? Oh, there's some leafers up here, Yeah, by the way, forced tutorials can go screw themselves. I will always give at least a positive mindset towards optional tutorials because of the word optional. This is fun. Are you guys liking this? I like going through with a fine-tooth comb and really reviewing the game rather than just talking about the lore. Good. I'm glad you're liking it, Samurai. And yeah, I'm looking forward to going through this with Chrono Trigger as well. Thank you, Third Leg. That means a lot, man. I don't know if I'll ever get that big, but that is the goal. Someday, over the rainbow, stuff will happen. Okay, so anyways, go out in the middle of this desert. Figaro Castle. I'd just like to say, I know I've already said it, but I love the sprite work. Look at the bricks on those towers. Now, the funny thing is, it has been often described that Deutsch has to go, so have fun. Hopefully I'll see you later. I'm probably going to be streaming at least until like 7. Or no, 6, excuse me. No, 8! God. This game has been described as a steampunk game, arguably one of the first really big RPG steampunk games. Not the first. But that, you know, it's funny how quickly and easily they get across this idea. They've just got those veins up there, which clearly and obviously do not fit in the otherwise medieval castle aesthetic they've got going on here, but it gets across the, hey, steampunk, you know, we've got this technology thing. And again, is that whole new overtaking the old thing I've talked about before. Yeah, I think the first time we all fought the twin golems, we all got murdered there, Progressive. Those guys were bastards the first time we fought them. So yeah, let's actually talk about the overworld really quick, because this is actually a good thing. And hey, Naywell. Don't actually know how to say that. I just like to say the song that's playing right now is among my favorite songs of all time. It's not the #1, but it's up there. So first of all, there's this. That's nice. Overworld design is a surprisingly tricky thing to do. You want to accomplish, theoretically, what you want to accomplish is two things, and you want to do both equally. You want to have a flow of motion throughout the course of the world so that it... Basically, okay, let me actually read on this. You want to have a flow of motion throughout the course of the story, and therefore it is logical you also have to flow of motion throughout the world. If you look at some of the older RPGs... I mean, talking, you know, NES era and the really early PC stuff, they got around that by basically making the world map like a circle. And you start at one end and you finish the other, and that was it. I mean, I don't mean literally a circle. But, like, you know, just... and you're done, right? It was very linear. Good overworld design, it also accomplishes a second objective on top of that, making it look like a world. Making it actually look like something you could see, actually having the continents make sense and having the terrain make a degree of sense and make it feel like a world in addition to having that flow. And it is harder to do that than it seems. I'll admit that freely. I've done a couple of overworld maps in the past, mostly for just fan stuff or for my own fun. And coming across that mix between the two of realism and gameplay integration is tricky. Now, I'm not saying FF6 is the first game to accomplish that. That would be stupid. But I personally feel FF6's overworlds, plural, both of them, accomplish that flow and that realism factor beautifully. And the other thing that's really great about that is there is a school of thought when it comes to game design about freedom of movement in an overworld, in a game that has an overworld map. You know, anything that has that kind of option. FF10, to use a counter example, is a game that has no overworld map. Literally does not actually have an overworld at all. All it has is, you know, it has the linear path you play through the game, and then when you get an airship, you know, when you finally get to the airship point, the freedom point, all you have is a frickin' menu saying, where do you want to go? And that just irritates the crap out of me. Oh, yeah, by the way, Chrono Trigger, if you're going to play Chrono Trigger, play the DS version. It's freaking awesome. It is a proper remake, in my opinion, not just a remake. It is hugely recommended. I've New Game Plus even just the DS version many times. But anyways, so several games have the line of thought of the freedom point. I actually just referenced that. In other words, that flow of motion, that happens because your options in character and in gameplay and in lore are literally limited. I just realized I should probably go close the door. I'll be right back. Listen to his stuff without worrying about me. Okay, so freedom point. You know, we're walking around on foot, or maybe we might get a, FF4 is actually what I would call the textbook example of flow of motion and freedom points, because you're walking along and then you get the I can't remember what it's called, the hover car. There we go. You get the hover car, and then you get the ship. And then you get the first airship, then you get the second airship, which has more options. FF3 kind of did this as well. So, and so did FF1, actually, now I think about it. You get the canoe, you get the ship. So, you unlock options to move as you go, and those give you greater freedom of where you can go. And if you think about it, it's actually the same kind of design philosophy that goes into a Metroidvania. In other words, the amount of areas you can reach slowly opens up as your inventory expands, as your your toolkit increases. Make sense? Now, the freedom point is when all that goes away. In most classic RPGs, that's when you get the airship. The airship, you know, the final airship, like the Invincible in FF3, or when you get the big whale, or when you just get the airship in FF6. At that point, you can go anywhere. There's no more limitations. There's nowhere you cannot reach on the overworld map. Now, there's a few places you can only reach with the airships. That's the final opening. That's the final step of the flow of motion throughout the course of the overworld map. But once you hit the freedom point, it's like, yeah! And the goal is to reach up to that point. Now, call me weird. I personally think FF6 does the flow and then the freedom point best, and here's my reasoning. They don't trickle it. FF1... and to an extent 2, and really a lot in 3 and 4, and a little bit in 5, all did the trickle effect. We'd get one thing that would allow us to go a few more places. We'd get a second thing that would allow us to go a few more places. You get a third thing, you know, etc., etc. FF3 is probably the most egregious about that, because you literally would get an airship like 10 minutes in, and then you'd lose it 5 seconds later, and then you get the ship, and then you turn that into an airship, and then you'd get the Nautilus, and then you turn that into a submarine, and then you get blah 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 blah, right? I like FF6's method better personally, because what they do in FF6 is they limit you by story where you are and what you can do. And one of the thematic points is that we are so down on resources and equipment and facilities and everything, whereas the Empire can just go wherever. The Empire has ships, the Empire has airships, the Empire well, not airships, but they have those sky magic armors, and they've got all this equipment and resources, and we're just wandering around on foot trying to keep up. So it's a thematic thing that you know, the underdog perspective, but also because at every point in time there is a good story reason why we can't just go anywhere up until when we get the airship, up until we hit the freedom point. The other cool thing I like about what they do in his FF6 is the freedom point doesn't come when we get the airship. Yeah? We get the airship, but when we get the airship, we get it specifically because we need to get to Vector. That's our goal. That's our overwhelming, overriding goal. So we are not given the freedom point there. The airship goes down there, parks, and then it's time to go to the Vector, right? Make sense? We don't get that freedom point till we escape from Vector. Then that's when we actually have full control over the airship, and then we can go wherever. But the other reason I like this method, and this is just pure personal preference, is it's like the breath of relief. Rather than trying to trickle it to us, and like Shuryu points out there, even in FF3 you get an airship and there are certain spots you can't reach because of how they've set it up. So it's not really, you know, it's like teasing. It's like the game is teasing you with freedom without actually giving it to you. Whereas in FF6 you have no freedom. Well, I mean, you're just on foot until you get the airship, and then bam, you have all the freedom. You can go anywhere in the entire overworld of the World of Balance the moment you get out of, well, not the moment, but, you know, the moment you get the airship, the moment you finish the cutscene with Meduin, and you're out of Zozo, and you have the airship, you are free to go. Total 100% can go literally every single location in the entire world. You can go to places that you're not supposed to go to yet. You can go to Thamasa the moment you have the airship. You can go up to in Tangiers area. You can go up to Dragon Neck Coliseum. You can go anywhere. It doesn't matter. Just go. You can go to the Imperial Base, which we're not supposed to be at yet, right? And I like that a lot. Just my perspective. Now, I will say all of this, the overworld design overall does definitely deserve a plus. I'm actually giving this 2 pluses. A plus to story and a plus to gameplay for the way it is integrated into both. That also counts for the World of Ruin. Well, no. That's just the World of Balance. We'll talk about the World of Ruin when we get there. I know exactly what it is. It's actually this. It's the headset here. Let me see if I can try and... I know exactly what you're talking about. It's bugging the crap out of me. Okay, maybe? There we go. I'll try not to move my head too much, because that'll help prevent it. So, okay. Oh, hey, it's you. Proceed. Because, you know, lock. Ah, damn it. This freaking headset. I might actually just have to buy a new mic soon or something. I really don't want to do that. I don't have the money for a Yeti right now. Now, in regards to what Javan just said, apparently Bravely Default will have the Thou Must Not thing, which irritates the crap out of me. It's one of the things I didn't like about Xenogears, not to speak bad of a game that I haven't played in years. Xenogears would have a situation where you'd go into a town you're not supposed to be at, and, like, the game would stop, and a cutscene would start, and the characters would explain in lengthy detail with huge text boxes exactly why you shouldn't be there yet, and then they would explain where you should be. And just to be extra insulting, the text, you know, it'd be like, we need to go to Vector. So instead of just having be normal text, the word Vector would be a different color. So it's like in bold, basically. You should be in this area, not where we are now. And then you'd leave. That used to irritate the crap out of me. So it sounds like Bravely Default does the same kind of a thing. Excuse me. Oh. 813? I don't know where that is. Okay, sorry. Spam phone call. I get a few of those every now and again. Cold calls, you know. Yeah, another very... Exactly. It's like, hey, you should go to this place. Damn it. And now the mic hits. I'm sorry about the noise, guys. I really am. I'm not sure I can 100% fix this. I might hit Micro Center or something later today. See if I can buy one. Anyways. So this is something that doesn't bother me because of its limitation. Go see the king. You know, I can't go anywhere right now. If I talk to, like, anybody in this castle, they'll just, like, go see the friggin' king. That's not 100% true, though. But the point is, they do that so they could limit scripting. It's a programming thing. Because, oh, yeah, by the way, nope, you're not supposed to be down there. So, yeah, they're kind of limiting your options, but you can still go some places. And just see a couple of things, little lore tidbits, little flavor. But my reason for explaining the scripting, for those of you who don't know how this sequence of events goes, we talk to Edgar and a cutscene plays, and then these guys move, right? So we could theoretically, like, if we could wall hack or through this guy, right, and go into here, and then go out through that way, and then go that way and talk to the matron, we would most likely start the script for the next cutscene. You know, literally bugging out the game and skipping to the next thing, which could cause untoward effects. So doing this kind of lockdown is very, very convenient from a scripting perspective for the code to make sure that you don't go out of sequence. Yeah, by the way, more of those air ventilation things on the ceilings there. I've always liked the personal implication that Figaro Castle is actually quite cool, despite being out in the desert. That it employs some kind of, you know, steampunk pseudo old style air conditioning unit. Also, actually, explains a few things. Oh God. Excuse me. I need to eat soon. Explains a few other things about how this castle can function underground for so long. The same way submarines can, basically. In other words, you need to have a decent chunk of an air bubble down there to live off of, to subsist off of, and then when you surface, you cycle the air out, right? Makes sense? And yeah, what Deacon just said is actually absolutely true too. We have an audience with the king, so everyone's just like, yep, go ho. Get a few extra things here. And again, this is what I mean by freedom. I know this sounds like a really minor thing, and it is. One of the things I liked about the older games is, yeah, in order to progress the game, I have to go talk to Edgar. Or I could go down the thing and talk to the NPC there to find out about the criminals. I could go hit the shops up. I could explore up here. Be like, there's a Phoenix Down up here. That's cool. I can go up here. There's no reason to. I can get a nice view from up top. Hey guys, here's the top of the castle. Cool, huh? There's no reason for it. There's no purpose for it. There's no benefit. It's just wiggle room. I think I can explain... Oh, I just thought of the most perfect analogy. Okay, you ready for this, guys? Because I just thought of the perfect analogy for the Final Fantasy ideal of fake freedom, okay? Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy XIII, we'll use two extremes here. Both of these games, okay, are a bus ride. Or an airplane ride, it doesn't matter. You know, you're on a mass transit of some kind. You're going from point A to point B. The travel... The destination is the same, the start point is the same, it's a linear trip, there's no avoiding that, right? FF13, you're on, I'll use the bus, because I've been on a bus recently, you know, you're on the bus, crammed, there's a guy right next to you, your legs are squished together, and you can't stretch out your arms on the armrests, so your arms are kind of squished together too, and you're just stuck in this spot like a sardine in a can. And you could argue, well, you're still getting to your destination, and that is correct. But what FF6 does is there's no one else in the aisle with you. You can stretch out. Rest your hands on the armrest, like I'm doing right now, physically with my chair. You can stretch your legs out, maybe rotate your ankles a bit. And as Samurai, you can get up, walk around a bit, stretch your legs, maybe chat with one of the other people there. It's still linear, but it is sufficiently fleshed out in your ability to function, your ability to be comfortable, your ability to do things other than just be on the bus, that you enjoy it more. Does that make sense? Ah. Go see the king. Oh, okay. That's another thing I liked. Anytime you talk to someone at the wrong angle, it'll automatically move you to the right angle. It does that a lot in this game. By the way, point of reference, Edgar's like 24. He is really young. I might be wrong on the age, but he's a youngin'. Especially to be a king, and as much of a genius as he is. And of course, as usual, demonstrating the personality with him doing the finger waggle thing there. Oh, excuse me. I also like the two of them head nodding back and forth as a way to indicate that they're having a conversation. That's pretty cool. Now, this always made me wonder if the possibility of imperialist spies in Figaro Castle existed. And if I'm being honest, I do personally think that's the case. First of all, Edgar goes out of his way right here and a couple other places to openly and loudly be like, "Yep, I am an ally of the Empire, totally an ally of the Empire," and he says it in situations where he doesn't have to. Now, obviously, there's some lore implications of why he would do that to get across points of the story, but I've always felt he was doing that for the sake of anybody who might be spying in on him at the time. This also makes a degree of sense because Kefka gets here really quickly, relatively speaking. I mean, he gets here almost right on our heels. Keep in mind, Kefka did not come from Narsh. Kefka came from the south. So, obviously someone had tipped them off in some manner. However, that is admittedly not an airtight case. It is also possible they just said, well, they left Narsh. You know, she's AWOL in Narsh, and therefore would have to be somewhere around here, so they just hit Figaro first because it was the most logical destination. There's a couple of reasons for that. So, you know, that's up to you to interpret however you want to. I also like this because Edgar, the original text, this is one of the few times I'll say the Japanese text is definitely better, because Edgar is throwing himself at Terra here. Just saying, like, you know, completely shamelessly flirting. I find it funny, though, because Terra, remember, is practically not a person at this point in time. You know, she has so little to go off of to determine a sense of self. She has no memories to speak of, no emotional connections to anyone. And so the idea of this guy, whether he's attractive or not, I've always felt Edgar probably is actually very attractive. He's just a type of character who doesn't, his personality pushes women away, but, you know, very attractive, very on top of things, and he's just like, yeah, I'm totally with you, and she's just staring at him like he's trying to communicate to her in semaphore, because she has no idea what signals he's sending, or why. Ah, this freaking mic. The shameless flirt in all of FF? Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah, I'm leaning towards Zidane. He really just was completely shameless about that. And of course, now we have freedom to roam and explore and all that fun stuff. Well, it's funny you say that, Dirty Fish Cake. In a perfect world, absolutely. But in a realistic society, you know, one of the things I said, and I've said several times before, is that sandbox games are the second hardest type of game to create. Of all the types of games that exist, a sandbox game has the most that can go wrong with it, and is the most likely to be subpar or bad. Because it's just that ridiculously difficult to make a sandbox game, right? A good one, I should say. It's easy to make a bad sandbox game. I've seen a few on Steam for like $10 that are bad sandbox games. But anyways, so I'm totally in favor of that if they could pull it off. And that's the trick, really. That is completely the trick, because, you know, I think it is likely that, especially with the way Chronix has been lately, that if they tried to make an open world Final Fantasy or a more sandbox Final Fantasy, it would be... Hey, Fitzcott. Now, this is an interesting line right here. This is the one I'm thinking of. Come on, come down. Come down. Come up to the... Come on. There we go. Relax. They're just blowing off steam, but I'm telling you, there's a sense of keeping us here. We're just small potatoes compared to the real threat out there, and King Edgar knows it. I like that line. It's a, sympathy for California? What's going on in California right now? Oh, jeez, Fitzcott. It emphasizes, it's a tiny little bit of foreshadowing about the fact that these are just thieves and brigands. You know, they're just tossed in jail for a bit, and, you know, then they'll be let out, whatever. Small potatoes, like he himself says. And, of course, these are the same thieves we'll be seeing in the World of Ruin, for anybody out there who is curious about that. But the real point is, he mentioned we're small potatoes compared to the real threat out there, and King Edgar knows it. I.e., the idea that Figaro is not idle on the Imperial threat. And I always like this, because this one line, more than anything else, gives me the theory that the Empire, ever since Edgar ascended to the throne, ever since their father was poisoned, most likely by the Empire, that Figaro, the kingdom, has been working and around the clock, nonstop, on trying to make themselves ready for an inevitable conflict with the Empire. And it's also worth noting that despite the Figaro Castle's not insubstantial military might, that's not the route they go. they go the technological route. Figaro tries to advance. Figaro tries to have better weapons, better technology, better mobility, the ability to move the castle, to literally remove the denizens and the people here from harm, that kind of a thing. That's the way Figaro Castle worked. Now, I've always felt a lot of that is up to Edgar himself, being the mechanical genius himself, who manages to... it's never stated outright, but it is implied heavily that he invented a lot of the stuff that makes Figaro Castle tick. Most likely, in my opinion at least, including the burrowing, moving technology as well. But see, the thing is, the reason I bring this up, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in a gameplay thing. Remind me not to do a gameplay thing for this, or excuse me, a story thing for this later on. This ties in beautifully with how the other major kingdom we see interacts with the Empire. Figaro pretends at an alliance. Hang on, there we go. Figaro... I can't stabilize this thing. It's just going to make noise. I'll get a new mic tonight, guys. I swear. I just need to get some money in my account, and then I'll go out and buy one. Figaro pretends at an alliance. They pretend to be on your side. They pretend to that, and they use that time to advance technologically to the point where they can avoid the Empire while working to subvert them by openly supporting the Returners. Doma goes for military resistance, openly supports the Returners, openly opposes the Empire, openly sets forth their armies, their trainways, their soldiers in order to oppose the Empire, and gets crushed like a bug. Even before the poisoning of Doma, the kingdom of Doma was losing badly. And I've talked about this before, especially with regards to the railway situation. And so we see the two different approaches and the way the two kingdoms differ from each other and how they vary in their approach. And again, this ties into that theme I've already mentioned like 5 times, the new replacing the old. Figaro embracing a new way of thinking, a literal new paradigm. Whereas Doma clings to the old ways, the way they would deal with problems and threats from ages past or decades past, where you would just, okay, here's an outside force, we will fight it, and they lose. That also is going to come up again when we get to the Doma section. But again, I don't want to talk too much about the Doma section just now. I just wanted to mention that here. By the way, Irvine is also... Irvine is more of a bad flirt than Zidane. Zidane at least has some smoothness to him and can actually pick up women. Irvine is a hopeless flirt. Irvine is the kind of person who will flirt on this 2 women within a few minutes of each other using the exact same lines. Yes, that actually happens in the game if you've forgotten. It's kind of pathetic. Did he, Samurai? I don't recall. The one I'm thinking about in FF8 is on a train. I forget which train trip, but it's one of the train trips. He hits on Selfie, and then hits on Quistis using the exact same line each time. I mean, word for word. This is another good example of audio design. The music just kind of slowly fades out as it goes into the flashback. Now, this is interesting. What we are about to see is not a flashback. What we are about to see is not the memories of Edgar or Sabin. What we are about to see is the matron reciting her memories of the time with us. And I feel that colors all of this scene. Now, I'm not saying this is like not what actually happened. But what I am saying is that all of this is probably colored by her emotions and perspectives of the time. Remember, this is a point in time in which the matron was pretty messed up too. And she actually makes a comment when you come back here with Sabin about how emotionally compromised she was at this point in time. Okay, I know what you're talking about, Samurai. I know exactly what you're talking about. Your first visit to Lindblom. That's not his. I was just typing in Samurai, and then I was like, wait a minute, Samurai won't fit. And I was like, oh, right, yeah. I'm stupid. But yeah, that's just her reciting her memories of Sabin and trying to get across what she remembered about Sabin, about Edgar, etc., etc. Not an actual recitation of the event. Make sense? Cool little thing there. Also, I'd just like to say the very idea of Chocobo Knights is cool. FF10 did something with that as well, and I believe FF14 did too. Not 100% on that. I'm sorry, I just think it's a cool idea. After we get our Chocobo, I'm going to pause for a bit. I really need some food. I'm starting to get shaky and weaky and all that fun stuff. And now, Kefka. I'm going to talk about Kefka before we get to this. First of all, Nobuo Uematsu is a damned genius. I'm sorry. I'm probably biased because the man literally taught me how to make music and literally taught me about musical math, for lack of a better term. But this man, listen to this song. Really analyze this song. It's pompous, and yet has sort of a military tint to it, and yet at the same time is just silly enough to get across the greatest implication, that the greatest the twist to Kefka's character. The fact that Kefka himself does what he does because he thinks other people are idiots for automatically assuming he is what he is based on how he acts. Does that make any sense? Let me put it into a different way. Kefka... God, I love this song. Kefka is the kind of person who will dress up as a clown and prance around because he knows you will look at him and label him. You will wrap him up in a nice, tidy little box with the label crazy on it and not think about it. Because people aren't like that. People aren't a word. People aren't a bullet point. There's more to a person than just a word. Yeah, exactly, Fitzcott. Exactly. Kefka has so many issues and so many problems. There's tragedy there. There's violence. There's hatred. There's the hole in his soul that was left because of the experiment it was doing him. And so he puts on this mask of the clown, the literal mask of the clown as well. And everyone just looks at him, and he just thinks that he just has so much resentment and hatred and bitterness towards the people for being so stupid. And he thinks it's funny. And okay, so first of all, we're going to put another plus on the story because, and I'm just going to explain it this way, because Kefka, and I really don't think I need to explain that. The elves are little people who excel at property. Exactly, you can't do that. And so the fact that Kefka plays to that, and I love it. But even this song gets across a few hints of that. Not all of it, of course, you don't get all that complexity in just a song. But if you really look at the song and really pull it apart, there are bits and pieces of that in the song. Emperor Gestal's stupid orders. Edgar, you pinhead! Why do you have to live in the middle of nowhere? Oh, there is no negative to the music in this game. I'll tell you that right now, Samurai. I actually thought about having a graphics/audio counter, but that's also going to be like a gargantuan positive. And I've already gone over so many, I've lost count, so I can't like do it over again. These recon jobs are the pits. I've read that article, Torin. In fact, during one of the lore runs, I referenced it and gave links to it. I was like, here, look at this. This is awesome. So this is another wonderful example of what I was just talking about. Kefka mocking and hating other people around him, and at the same time finding it funny. I know that sounds weird, So let me explain what I mean by this a little bit. Some people think you can only have one emotional reaction to a situation. Yet I'm going to use a really weird analogy to explain what I mean. Love, okay? Love can be simultaneously positive and negative. It can be introversion and extroversion. Um, it can be selfless and selfish simultaneously, because emotions are complex things, right? You with this? So Kefka simultaneously finds the interactions and the stupidity of the people around him funny and incredibly aggravating. And it's clear over the course of the game that Kefka is just, at least in my opinion, that Kefka is just getting more and more and more pissed off and amused at how stupid and pointless everything else, until it really culminates when he's in, hey little Billy, when he's in Thamasa, and all the Espers show up, and he's like, okay, let's go on. And the Espers are just as pathetic as everyone else. And so Kefka, at this point, you know, you get the impression that he had been thinking, you know, oh my god, it is Baroness, you're absolutely right. He was probably expecting more. You know, the Espers, the great legendary creatures of old, are just as much stupid, weak, pathetic morons as everyone else. And he found that, and that I personally feel that's the moment Kefka decided to destroy everything. When the greatest power in the world was revealed to be a joke, just like everything else. But we'll talk about that more when we get there. Anyways, so here he is, you know, there's sand on my boots. Great line. And the soldiers rush off. See you around, Scorpion. Soldiers rush off. Yes, sir. All set, sir. So, it's funny, and it's irritating. Why do you think he calls them idiots? You know, why is that line there? That stuck in my mind for so long until I decided to go ahead, this was many years after I played this game for the first time, and decided to do a primitive, younger, stupider version of analysis mode on this game, and I saw it, and I'm staring at it, and it's like, oh my god, he hates these people. He did that specifically to showcase how, yeah, exactly, Deacon. He did that to showcase just how pathetic these two soldiers were. These two nameless, worthless grunts who are so willing to toe in the line, you know, that he did. And as Aded points out, Kefka doesn't order them to point out them. He just points out, there's sand on my boots, and the soldiers rush to clean it off. And I'm sorry, but that actually is pathetic. That is pathetic. Kefka's right. That's stupid. You know? I'm Kefka. Because Kefka. I should put another plus up there, but I'm not going to. Excuse me. Another nice little thing they do here. Locke's back there, and these three guys are blocking. If you notice, we're actually stuck here. This is a tiny little. Oh, I know, Samurai. Yeah, and yeah, he's just gonna get more sand on him. It's so stupid. Get this sand off my boots. You're in a desert. God, they're so stupid. I'm sorry. I sympathize with Kefka more than I should. I'm not evil. Hashtag not evil. But Jesus. Anyways, this is another good game design thing. Locke's back there, preventing us from going that way. These guys have completely blocked the corridor. We can't go over there. We can't go through the doors. We have to interact with this cutscene. I mention this because back in the day, they didn't do a lot of non-interactive cutscenes. What we used to call cutscenes were what you're seeing right now, with dialogue and people moving around a bit. But nowadays, most cutscenes in games, and I don't mean this as a necessarily derogative thing, but sometimes it can be overused, are completely non-interactive to the point where you literally put the controller down and watch the movie for a bit. I'm looking at you, FF13. So I like, you know, I like this thing a little bit better. What brings Kefka, humble servant of Emperor Gaston, to our lowly presence? A girl of no importance recently escaped from us. We heard she'd found refuge here. This wouldn't have anything to do with this witch everyone's been whispering out, would it? Lies. She merely stole something of minor value. Is she here? So here's a question for you guys. Did Kafka, through the spies I mentioned, theoretical spies, we don't know if there actually are spies here, but through the theoretical spies I mentioned, did Kafka find out Terra was here and therefore decide to attack Figaro? Or did he not find anything else out about it at all and decided just to go ahead and burn the place because, why not? And I'm not saying, like, I don't want to be dismissive. He's not just burning it for kicks, although it is fun for him to burn this castle to the ground, even though it's made of stone. We'll not talk about that. But, he is doing it because it is logical. FF8 actually had the exact same plot point, if you'll remember. Destroy all the safe ground. The Firefly movie, Serenity, had the same thing, too. You destroy all the safe houses, so there's nowhere safe to be, in order to ensure that there's less places for whatever you're looking for to go to, right? So, in a really stupid and weird way, what Kefka does here is actually a good option. So, yeah, Torin points out both the points here. It is entirely possible it is both options. Now, I could go talk to Locke, but let's see what happens when I do this. We just go. Have a night's rest. I'm really tired, guys. Fire 1? I don't know, little Billy. Yeah, the operative. Thank you, that's the quote. If your enemy has gone to ground, ensure he has no ground to go to. That was the quote I was really reaching for. You wanna know how funny this is? We could go talk to Locke. Or we could leave entirely. This is the kind of thing you don't get in modern games. I mean, I have to go talk to Locke to progress the plot. But I could go up to Narsh right now. I could go over to South Figaro Cave. I could go get a chocobo. I could go fight in the forest for some time if I could do whatever. A very fake form of freedom, but I mean, still, it's there. Nothing really, Torin. You just get kicked out the same way you would otherwise. I don't remember if it's the exact same message. To be honest with you, I haven't done that in a long time. It's a long trip up there. But either way, you get ejected from town just like you would otherwise. Did you know magic existed once upon a time? Hint, hint. I would never have thought that something like magic would exist. Yeah, Narsh has some issues. We'll showcase that later, too. Oh, it's too slow. Hey, Locke. Bye, Locke. Is it true you're a thief? It's a treasure hunter. So here's where we find out about Edgar's collaboration with the Returners, which every one of us in the audience already figured out, because duh. Now, I like her line there, but I'm a soldier of the Empire. I've heard some people say that's a stupid line, but it makes perfect sense to me, because I want to stress this again, because it's really important. Terra has no sense of self. No memories, no personality to guide her. She wandered around as a soldier of the Empire for some time, remember? And then, so it's like a self-identifier. If you don't know what this is like, wind is a finite resource. If you don't know what this is like, I've actually been through this once myself when I came out of surgery. When you can't mentally lock in on anything, when you're basically lacking in cohesion, anything you do actually manage to understand or to grasp, you tend to latch onto. And so Terra here is, well, I am an Imperial soldier. And if you'll notice, that will remain a trend all the way up until the Narsh incident, until the big battle of Narsh. She will constantly identify herself as an Imperial soldier because it's all she has to identify herself is that she can cast magic, and she's an Imperial soldier. And that's it. That's all she's got. And of course, this line is among my favorite lines in this game. How will I know which way is right? Which is a great line, especially since there is no way to know such a thing. But also because it really emphasizes the struggle that Terra is going through right now. Then this music starts. God, I love this music. This is why I'm not using a music cat minner right here. Hey, it's a new song. Plus. Hey, it's a new song. Plus. So, Figaro Castle, made of stone, on fire. I think that's a negative, guys, because that has always bugged me. And note, we know that's not magical fire. That's not what they're using. It's just... Actually, I suppose we don't actually know that's magic. It could be Magitek, because they do have Magitek armors here. So it's possible that's Magitek fire. That's actually a good point, now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm analyzing that. It is actually quite possible that is, in fact, magical fire. Fire! There we go. Trapped him! You're trapped now, soldier. Deliberate Beavis and Butthead reference, if anybody's curious. I know I've been asked that before. Yes, that was deliberate. Yeah. You don't actually have to talk to Kefka at all here. Based on what Kefka says here, by the way, whether Kefka believes him or not, I'm inclined to believe what Torin said earlier. That this is actually a both scenario. He probably has some spies in the area who clued him in that Terra was somewhere in the vicinity, and screw this place, right? So again, the same thing as if your target has gone to ground, make sure there's no ground to go to. So yeah, that's my personal take on this. I don't think this deserves a negative, the fire thing. It can be explained away, and it doesn't really detract from the story. It's just bugged me for a long time. I'm going to go ahead and assume that really it is the Magitek, because they have Magitek soldiers here, and duh, right? Remember how Kefka loathes and despises everyone around him? Shameful that a king would flee, leaving his people behind. How utterly delightful. I just pointed out because that is yet another aspect, that is another example of Kefka's mindset right there. That he actually thinks Edgar would be that despicable of a person to leave his people behind, which he's not. Edgar's probably one of the best good guys in this whole game. Or excuse me, the most good guys, right up there with Locke. But he actually assumes that, and in so assuming, he finds the simultaneous, disgust / amusement out of it. Also, when I first saw this, I thought this was freaking awesome. I agree with that, Baroness, absolutely. I've always loved the mental picture, and it's really obvious that this is actually what happens, because that the castle going under really disturbed the sand around here. So Kefka is basically left, just trying to get away, and there's probably some kind of sand pit he was trying to go. I imagine if they ever did this in full 3D awesome, full CGI 3D awesome, that they would have a whole scene of Kefka just struggling not to be sucked into the sand with the rest of Figaro Castle. And that's why he gets so pissed off and sends some Magitek after you. Now, I've been speedrunning this game so many times that I haven't seen this cutscene in a long time. So, let's see what this cutscene's like. Okay. So, yeah, I knew I had something to talk about here. Remember Locke didn't recognize what a slave clown was, right? It didn't occur to him, and he just thought of Terra as some kind of witch whispered about in theory, right? Whereas Arvis, Arvis? Yeah, Arvis actually knew about it and had some understanding of the situation. Edgar is someone who is extremely well learned. He has a tremendous amount of knowledge, intellect, you know, the genius IQ thing, right? Why is this significant? Because it makes perfect sense that, from a gameplay perspective, we could have been casting magic all over the place when we're partied with Locke, and he won't flinch. I mean, why would he? He doesn't know what he's looking at. It is Edgar who is skilled enough and understanding enough of the ways of the world to recognize what that is, to realize that that is magic rather than just some supernatural ability or whatever. And I like that because it's a great way in lore to explain why this cutscene happens now rather than earlier, or indeed multiple times. If you'll notice, this is the only time the magic thing ever comes up. After this, it's a non-issue. And I like that because this is the perfect time for it to happen, story-wise. If I was writing this is exactly when I'd have it happen. Don't want it too early, because then you risk repeating it. You don't want it too late, actually kind of for the same reason. You don't want it, Sabin joins the party, oh my god, what's that magic? Bannon joins the party, oh my god, it's magic, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, it makes perfect sense here, especially with the guy who is the scholar and the intellectual gentleman who actually know what that is. And of course, after the fact, you can assume they just kind of explain what magic is to everyone. Now, once he explains what magic is, Locke does this. Completely wigs out over it. Now, of course, they freak out and they're like, Terra, where'd you learn that? Terra's response is, learn? I learned magic? And then, of course, it is Locke who completely rushes in to try and smooth things over. A, because he's already kind of imprinted on her because of the amnesia/protective nature of Locke, and B, because Locke's a good guy. It is also worth noting Locke immediately turns around and tries to apologize. But notice how Locke here is actually defending Terra from Edgar. I don't mean like literally with swords and knives and whatnot. I mean from an emotional perspective, from a social perspective. He is already showcasing his protector role he has assumed over Terra, even to someone who is not only an ally but a friend, and that he's known for years. And of course, because this is Japanese, they swoon. Now you see this line right here? Stop swooning. Me and my friend Vincent used to spend literally way too much time trying to theorize on who said that. Who says no swooning? Now, his theory was it's actually the Magitech armors, which is kind of blasted apart by the fact that you can hit that cutscene in just about any fight up until the South Figaro Cave is over. Son of a submariner. I like this line, by the way. I know the original line is son of a sandworm, but son of a submariner just has a weird ring to it, and it just strikes me as odd enough to be Kefka. So, this is a great example of no music being used for dramatic purposes. We have just had a huge high in terms of energy and emotion, you know, we've been introduced to Kefka, we've been introduced to magic, we've had this grand escape, we've had, well, not really an exciting fight, but, you know, this whole thing, and then it's all back down to quiet. It's a nice pause point after the energy and excitement of the previous several scenes. So this is when both of them bring up the thing about, you know, Bannon, magic, the returners. And I like them theorizing. And it's got to be frustrating for everyone involved here, especially Edgar, someone who very much strikes me as a kind of Tony Stark character. Actually, now that I think about it, he really is a lot like Tony Stark. The movie, Tony Stark specifically. Someone who sees a puzzle and wants to fix it, right? I'll say you suck, Samurai. And so he's trying to figure this out, and he's trying to get answers from Terra, and he can't because she doesn't know anything. And so he's just theorizing, spitballing, and he points out that, you know, in an indirect way that she's not human, and she just can't deal with that. And then he immediately apologizes for it, and she's just like, I don't know what to do. My heart just goes out to Terra. especially for the first half of the game. She is just so lost and so broken. You think she would fit right in with KOTOR 2? Yes, I would, Little Billy. Absolutely. Without hesitation. Now, this is funny, because some people have accused this of being a trickle exploration thing, like I was talking about earlier, that FF3, 4, and 5 all did a lot of. I don't agree. This doesn't actually give you... The Chocobo does not add any explorative openness to you. You can't go anywhere in a Chocobo you couldn't go on land. The only thing it does is get sort of random encounters, and of course makes you go, wee, meow, meow, which is admittedly kind of cool. So that's not really the same thing. That's not the explorative thing. That's just a way to bypass encounters. Alright, I'm going to go get some food. Hey, Ed. I'm about to stop. I will be back. I'm going to go get some food in me. Then I'm going to go back and we'll keep reviewing Final Fantasy VI, which may or may not be the best game ever.